Well, good morning, everyone. And it looks like they are starting early. Look at this. Go Buck Buffalo. What a cool name. Just me said they are early. Angie Gibson, girl, where you been? Hey, Britt. Diva. Emily's on the way to work. Hey, Nufflin. Uli's been in. Hey, Wolf. Let today be the day. May the jury only take 3 hours to bring justice. Anyone have any speculation? Anything like that? Sailor said, afternoon, fam. Sailor, what are you thinking? How long do you think it's going to take them to bring in a verdict? Good morning, Tanya. Good morning. Look at this with the little Smurf avatar. I'm too honest for this. Conviction day. Good morning, Joy Callie. What on earth is going to happen? Well, let's take a deep breath because I know it's been a lot to go through, and just tell our friends hi. Go Buckafuckalo said, I can't wait to hear what's in store for Leilani. A lot of people have been really worried, thinking that the reasonable doubt is going to set her free. What do you all think? I'm convinced. I'm not on the jury, so I don't count. Good morning, Beth Carter. But I'm convinced that she is the only one that could have killed Quentin and put him in the dumpster. Connie said, I'm worried. All right, my friends, let's get to it.
Good morning. And Mr. Purse, Mr. Hilliard, good morning to you. And good morning, Ms. Simon. Let the record reflect that counsel for the state as well as counsel for the defense are present. Ms. Simon is present with her counsel. And we are on the record in SPCR 22-03364 J6, the state of Georgia versus Leilani Marie Simon.
She's got the cream sweater on again, and she's looking through notes like she knows what she's looking at. Goodness. All right. No more fashion police.
Where we left off yesterday, we were reviewing the charges. We had our charge conference. We have a draft, hopefully a final draft, but I hope that you've had an opportunity to take a look at it. Are there any objections or exceptions to the instructions?
Other than what we made yesterday, Judge? I mean, I understand this was the court's final charge, but yesterday we noted objection along the way. I'll pull that back out if I need to.
No, that's fine. That was done along the way, but this is the final version, and I wanted to make sure there wasn't something that still needs to be changed, or if there was any error. We noted some places where gender needed to be changed, even small changes, because the jury instructions will go out with the jury. Mr. Purse.
Other than the objections we made yesterday, and I don't see any gargantuan problems. Of course, as the court knows, after the charges are given, the law provides if we have objections, we have to make them then. And they probably will be the ones that, some of which we repeated yesterday. I just don't want the court to be surprised.
I'm just being cautious, given lots of opportunities
Yes, ma'am.
to object and make exceptions. So,
This is in order with what the court told me yesterday.
okay.
There was only one error I saw, Your Honor. I just take it as a scrivener's error. Grave suspicion appears to have been inadvertently charges.
Grave suspicion is in here, isn't it?
It is.
He's being facetious.
Mr. Dean.
I'm being aspirational.
Remember, he has a vehement dislike of that charge.
Visceral.
A visceral dislike.
Yes, it's visceral. Okay, so then I'm going to ask you to turn your attention to the verdict form. It was emailed. I can give you a copy.
I think I need one, Judge. I have the charges. I don't.
Here we go. Ms. Blake is making copies now. Mr. Dean, you need copies as well.
I do, I'm sorry. I'm just.
No, that's fine. I think that was a very late in the middle of the night edition.
Makes me happy to know somebody else is working late.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Ms. Blake. And good morning to you, Ms. Blake, Mr. Bryant, Ms. Natalie. And let the record reflect that copies of the verdict form have been provided to both the state and the defense.
Looks fine, that's me.
Okay.
Same here.
All right, very good. So we have our verdict form as well. So, with regards to closing argument, Mr. Dean, will you be utilizing the opening and closing?
I will do the first argument for the state, and Ms. Parker will close it out.
All right, very good. Is there anything that we need to take up before bringing in the jury?
Not on behalf of Ms. Simon, Judge Knapp.
Thank you. Is the state ready to proceed?
At 10 o'clock?
Right, right. That's what I thought too.
Where are we? Well, we didn't need to be here as early as we are, did we? Mr. Hilliard, I think you wanted us here at 9:30. At least that was the soft suggestion, and I said 9 o'clock. Yeah, 10 o'clock.
So
'Cause
we
still have to
are
bring
ready
the
to proceed at 10.
jurors. That's fine. So, but otherwise, you're ready to proceed,
Yes.
and Mr. Hilliard as well.
Yes, sir.
But yes, at 10 o'clock. But I'm just trying to make sure that we cover all of our bases before we bring the jurors in. So at 10 o'clock, I expect that we will bring them in and get started right away. All right, any questions at this point?
Yeah, Your Honor.
Oh, yes. Let's do that now.
And we want to know if Mr. Bean or yourself are going to be using the exhibits for your closing. Because we have them separated.
I'm not.
Okay,
I'm not.
Okay.
I think at this point in time, they.
so the snack after. Yeah, the snack was fine.
It's the one. Thank you.
And I know we inventoried, or the state, the defense inventoried the exhibits along with the clerk yesterday. Will there need to be anything further with that before we get to that point?
The only thing I can think of, Your Honor, is there was one PowerPoint that I didn't have a printout. Typically, I made them. If they have video or something like that, I'll have a disc in addition to the printout so that they're reviewing court and see the moving parts in the PowerPoint. There was one, I think it was Sergeant Coleman's video footage presentation, where all I had was the disc, and I indicated to the court that I intended to print out a paper version of it and change it to, 63A and B as opposed to just the one thing. I think we need to do that between now and 10 o'clock.
Mr. Hilliard?
Well, I usually just look through it before we send it back to the jury judge and deal with any continuing witness issues at that point. So,
And again, I'm dotting I's and crossing T's before we even get to that part of the alphabet. So, all right. So with that, we'll recess until 10 o'clock and we'll begin closing arguments at that time. Thank you.
Just out of curiosity, Judge, how much time do we have a piece for the rule? Was it 1 hour or 2 hours?
It's 2.
2 hours.
All right. Thank you. We're in recess.
Holy hell, they just got there. And she said to them, they each have 2 hours for closing arguments. 2 hours. That's insane. That's insane. So she's saying 10 o'clock, the jury will be in. All right. This has been definitely one of the worst cases we've ever covered on this channel. Okay. Definitely. The video, in my opinion, is what is going to sway the jury. Jenny Pooh said the judge told the jurors to be there at 10. Yeah, so it's 8:54 my time, meaning 6 minutes. And how many breaks are we going to take between closing statements? If they each have 2 hours, then get done with closing statements. Then let them go have their damn Subway sandwich. All the comments I have been seeing, okay? All the comments I've been seeing in the news articles, the Facebook groups, the Twitter, all of it. It comes back to this. Now, mind you, She's not on trial for being a piece of shit person, but she is. But she had to go out and get rid of stinky shrimp pasta. It is not possible because we know she had other stops to make before she got to the dumpster. We know she was at the gas station getting the 2 tall boys. We know she went to knock some boots and get her rugs from Red. Her tag was scanned at all these different places. This is where she wound up. After she went back to Buckhalter, see, she's thinking. I've got this beautiful little baby behind me that's hanging on for life. I can put him in the pack and play and take my chances, or I can put him in the dumpster and say he was kidnapped. But this video seems to bring a lot of confusion to people. Let's go through it before they get to closing arguments.
17. This is a video clip, right?
Yes, sir. This is the video camera angle from New Ride Auto pointing towards Buckhalter. And you can also see a little bit of 17.
And what time is this footage from?
The timestamp says 1:16 and 15 seconds on Wednesday.
October 5th, 20.
Sal Lady said she only needed a shower to get rid of the stinky shrimp pasta smell. Well, that came from between her legs, considering she spreads them for anyone that's got something in their pocket you can get high from. All right? It's been made clear they had spaghetti that night. They had spaghetti. She doesn't seem to be a cleanly person, that she's so worried about something rotting in the fridge or in her room that she just had to get rid of it that night. No. It's been made clear they had leftover spaghetti. Then she went to 204 and Red got some more of her leftovers.
2022.
Yes.
All right. And what are we going to see in this clip?
You're going to see a vehicle pass through your view on the road.
On which road is it going to be on initially?
Buckhalter.
And what direction is it going to be traveling?
It's going to be traveling northbound or towards Ageechee Road.
And when it hits that intersection of Buckhalter and Ogeechee Road, what is it going to do?
It will take a right.
And what type of vehicle does it appear to you to be?
It appears to be a Dodge Journey, a light colored Dodge Journey.
Okay, again, I'm going to pause it. The Dodge Journey comes into play. My notes are all over this room, everything I have written down for the last 2 weeks. The Dodge Journey comes into play because Danny said he drove the Dodge Journey. They found the Fireball in there, all the things that he likes to drink, you know. But her phone was in there. And she was seen at the gas station. getting the two tall boys of Natty Light. This is definitely her. And I'm not going to argue with people on the damn internet. I'm just not. Okay? I think we're a little smarter around here. Anita Blackstone. Love you. Danny said they had spaghetti and not shrimp pasta. Let's just say they had shrimp pasta the night before and you put it in the refrigerator. It's not stinking up the whole house to where you have to go get rid of it that night. No, that is another BS story. She had her Life 360 on. She was charging her phone. It's her.
Now, this series of video clips is in chronological order of when the events occurred, correct?
Yes, sir, they are.
So at this point, that Dodge Journey is taking a right onto Ogeechee Road from Buckhalter Road, right?
Yes, it is.
All right, moving to slide 18, we see the two source buildings marked again. In slide 19, this shows the position and orientation of the first camera that we're going to see footage from, correct?
Yes, sir, it does.
Now, can we see the overhang for the Chevron pumps up there in the top left area?
Yes, sir, in the top right, top left.
And are those some U-Hauls next to that kind of reflecting?
Yes, I think at the time they were running U-Hauls at that establishment.
In that timestamp that says 23:56, that's 80 to 81 minutes slow, correct?
Yes, sir.
So if it says 23:56 and you add 80 to 81 minutes, you get like 1:17 a.m. or so
Yes, sir.
on October 5th, 2022, right?
Yes, sir.
And what is this clip going to show?
It's going to show a vehicle approach from the left side of the screen, and then it will make a right-hand turn on the entrance to Azalea Mobile Home Park.
Does it appear to be the same vehicle as in the last clip we just watched?
It does.
Okay, this is an important comment from Oh Waitress. I'm so glad you're here. Danny's testimony was emotional. Yeah, it was. Who in here felt bad for Danny? Again, not saying he's salt of the earth, not saying he's the best dude in the world, but that testimony really got to me. Oh Waitress said Danny's testimony was emotional, so I'm not quite sure now that he's totally innocent. There has to be something that set her off. Excessive crying. He didn't hear nothing. When I think about the testimony of the forensic anthropologist that explained this to us. Again, this is a really important comment by Oh Waitress. This is his skull. Nobody in that house was going to hear anything because little baby Quentin, was unconscious. She hit him in the head. And that's disgusting. And he also could be acting so guilty for not knowing. Sal Lady, you're exactly right. They scanned her license at the store when she was there. So not only is she on camera, they scanned her license. A lot went on in that house that night.
And this would have been just seconds after that clip we just watched, correct?
Yes, sir.
Now, slide 21, this signifies the camera pointing the other way.
Yes, sir, it does.
And I think you mentioned earlier that a vehicle driving into Azalea would pass through the field of view of the camera we just watched footage from into the field of view of this camera.
Yes.
Now, the next slide, what are we going to see here?
You're going to see a vehicle enter from the right-hand side of the screen and then go all the way across the screen and exit the left-hand side of the screen.
Now, we looked at that image earlier of that right turn that you can take with the red arrows.
Yes, sir.
And can you see that street where you would take a right? That's in this frame. isn't it?
Yes, sir, it does.
Does the vehicle take a right on that road or not?
No, it does not.
And does the vehicle that we're about to see seem to be the same one from the previous vehicle?
It seems to myself, it seems to be the same vehicle.
And this clip would just be like a second or two after that one.
Yes, yes.
All right. Same vehicle driving.
The
same-
cameras are right next to each other.
Now, you mentioned earlier that if you drive in this way that we've just watched this car do, you can make a loop and take that one-way exit road.
Yes, sir. It's a loop. There's several roads that bisect it, but you have to go to that other road to exit.
Is this the way we just saw this car drive? Is that the way that you would drive to make that loop
Yes,
that takes you past the dumpsters and to that one-way exit road?
that is the full loop. Yes, sir.
Now, what is this here?
Appears to be a still image of the vehicle that we just watched on the video.
And what is this next slide here, slide 24?
This is a Dodge Journey that is sitting in, I believe, the technical garage of the FBI building.
Is that the Dodge Journey that was towed from 535 Buckhalter?
Yes, sir, it is.
Does that Dodge Journey that was towed from the house and photographed at the FBI office, does that appear to be consistent with the vehicle that we're seeing in this security footage?
Yes, sir, it does. I pay particular attention to what we call the
Okay, I'm going to pause that because they're coming into court.
The defense. After closing arguments, the court will give you instructions at that time. So at this point, though, I'm going to turn to the state to begin.
Last Monday, during opening statements, I made a couple commitments to you. All right, these are very basic commitments. I told you that the evidence was going to show that the defendant killed her beautiful baby boy, threw him in a dumpster, and lied about it a whole bunch of times while law enforcement picked apart her multiple ever-changing stories and Doug Quinton out of the window. Now, what did the defense tell you that the evidence was going to show? The defense told you that this case was going to be about rumor, speculation, gossip, innuendo, words like that. What happened after that? Well, what happened after that is that you heard from almost 40 witnesses and received almost 100 exhibits, close to 100 exhibits, all of which lead you to the inescapable conclusion that the defendant did, that she killed Quinton and covered it up. Now, that presumption of evidence, or presumption of innocence, that the judge told you about at the beginning of the trial, that is gone now. That is a frame of mind that you have to adopt at the beginning of a trial so that you don't prejudge the case. Everybody's entitled to that, all of us. Right? But it is gone now. Every witness we call, every exhibit we introduce, every bit of evidence that you see is chipped away at that presumption, and you no longer have to presume her innocent. And you should not presume her innocent. She sits before you right now proven guilty. Most of the evidence in this case was anything but rumor. All of it really was anything but rumor, gossip, and innuendo. Most of it was surveillance footage, GPS data, DNA, and so forth. We did call a couple of people that knew this family, knew the defendant, saw how she interacted with Clinton. They basically told you that she hated him. But that wasn't rumor. That wasn't gossip. That was based on things that they saw and they heard. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what the evidence in the case shows and how the law applies to it. Because you're about to have to go back and apply the law to the facts of the case. Okay. Let's talk about evidence. Evidence is simply the means by which any fact that is put in issue is established or disproved. Evidence includes all of the testimony of the witnesses and any exhibits. You know, sometimes you'll hear people say stuff like, well, there's no evidence, there's just a bunch of people came in and said some things. Testimony is evidence. Everything that you've heard is evidence, and it all cuts against her. Evidence can be direct or circumstantial. Direct evidence is, I see my 5-year-old son under his bed eating candy in the middle of the night. That's happened. Circumstantial evidence is, I don't see it, but I find the candy wrappers the next morning. They weren't there the day before. And when I ask him about it, maybe he tells me a story about how it was actually his friend Misty or something like that. There is no legal difference in the weight that you may give to either direct or circumstantial evidence. It's all evidence, just the same. Now I'm going to start with the 204 trip as I go through the evidence and what it shows. Okay? Everybody knows about the dentist and going to Cheddar's and picking up the kids and everything. We don't need to start at 5:30 in the morning. We're going to start with the 204 trip. Because this goes directly to the state of mind that she was in when she did this. Now, she told them, and you heard her say why she went on this trip in the first place, what prompted it. And it was another argument with Danny about how he doesn't pay enough attention to her. The evidence has shown that this defendant craves attention. She needs attention, specifically male attention. She needs it like you need oxygen. That is what is going on with her.
The rest of that hearing, they had some sort of argument, you were frustrated.
Yeah, I was frustrated. It wasn't like an argument. It was more like I don't understand why you don't believe that she needed type stuff. So once again, I was going to work this. Pretty much. And the only way I could make myself get away from that and to try not to get 100% into that type of mindset was to take off further.
She told Bridget Brock the same thing.
You talked about leaving, and I think you and Danny had an argument too at some point in time.
It was because of the lack of sexual attention that I was getting frustrated with. That's the whole reason why I left anyways and came up with the reason.
Okay.
When she's not getting the attention, the amount and type of attention that she feels that she's entitled to, that she craves, that she needs, it makes her feel worthless, and it puts her in a really bad state of mind. And that's what was going on tonight. And of course, it's exacerbated by the tooth and all that stuff. So at 10:22, she opens this dining room door and she goes out to the Dodge Journey. That's the only door anybody really uses, coming and going from this house. It takes you right in the dining room. You come right out of the driveway into the dining room. And she goes to the Circle K, and she's looking kind of rough. Her face is swollen. She's got a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. She's not in a good way. She's in a bad way. And and she buys 2 natural light tall boys and 2 cigarillos. Now, the beer might have been for Danny. That seems to be how she gets out of the house without telling him where she's going, having her run and pick up some beer. But the cigarillos, those were for her and Craig. That's who she's looking for. All right, there's messages between them in arranging these prior meetups where he's asking her to pick up rolling papers. He's talking about needing to find a room, I guess in his mom's house, I think is what he says, out on Arkwright Road, where they could find, where they could smoke. Because what she and Craig are doing at this time, what they do is they get together, they smoke weed, they kick it, and they have sex. Right? That's what the evidence shows is what was going on between them. And she has been doing this a lot in the week plus leading up to this. These are all messages from her to Craig that are in evidence, and you can see them. September 25th, 2 in the morning, on the way. September 22nd, just after midnight. Okay, I'm passing Quaco now. September 28th, 10 p.m., on the way now. October 1st, 1 a.m., I'm about to head that way probably. Just probably can only stay for a couple hours. A couple hours. These people are spending a lot of time together. October 2, about to drive over there, actually. October 2, that was in the morning. This is in the evening. About to head over there and grab his ass at 40 so he'll shut up. This is what I was talking about. The way she gets out of the house and goes over here, she tells Danny she's going to make a bigger run. Now, it's not just about the sex, all right? It's that he is providing this attention and affection that, again, it's like air to her. She has to have it. He's sending her messages like, this is in the context of her complaining about Danny and how he's not giving her what she wants. Craig is sending her messages such as, don't worry, it will be okay, I got your back. And she's replying, I know you do, and I got yours all the way. This is what she needs, this is what she craves. And this is what she is looking for that night. The evidence essentially shows that Craig was like her emotional support drug dealer at the time, okay? And these are texts between her and Danny. Now, she had not told Danny that that's where she was going. She mentioned, she must have just mentioned the Circle K, the convenience store run. And the reason I say that is at 10:32, when she's leaving the Circle K, she tells Danny, gonna run to 204, I guess. He did not know that that's where she was going, because he responds, oh, okay. Be safe, I guess, my queen. I will be, and I'll be quick, I promise. And she had told him that before. He says, I hope so. So now she's on the way out to see Craig. 10:36, the dining room door opens, and that's Paul getting home. Danny texts the defendant 2 minutes after that door activity. Paul showed up and is going to bed. Now, Paul told you that after he got something to eat and went upstairs, he was in the bedroom and pretty much out of play for the rest of the night. That's direct evidence. Danny told you the same thing. That's direct evidence. The defendant in her interviews said the same thing. That is direct evidence. And Paul's phone activity provides circumstantial evidence supporting this. There's this exchange between him and a coworker where the coworker asks Paul, what time are you going in tomorrow? And Paul responds with a 2-digit response, 12. That's at 11:40. He told you at this point I was laying in bed and either asleep or going to sleep. And the guy sends him 2 more messages and Paul doesn't respond. That short response and then the lack of any response to those 2 following messages is circumstantial evidence that what all 3 of them told you, that he was up in his room and out of play, is true. So that's what I mean when I say all this stuff is evidence, direct and circumstantial. You can look at this stuff and tell what happened. Back to Danny and the defendant's text messages with him. 10:41, she tells him, I'm about to turn on to 204. He says, okay. And then you get this series of text messages. Now, again, Danny told you that he was asleep. Okay, he told you that he was asleep or close to it when she got back from 204. She said that in her early interviews when she was all in on the abduction between 6 a.m. and 9 a.m. story, and it didn't occur to her that she might have to at some point throw Danny under the bus and pretend like he was awake. She said that he was asleep. And there's a series of, so that's direct evidence, those two things. Now there's a series of messages that provide circumstantial evidence in support of that, strong circumstantial evidence. The only way to read these messages is this is a dude who just wants to go to bed and is in the process of doing that. 10:44, he says, thank you for the little bit left, baby, so sweet, no lie. Now, he was straight up with you. He told you this is a reference to a very small amount of cocaine that she had left for him. He wasn't trying to hide anything from you. And he went to sleep not long after this. And you heard from Special Agent Snyder that drugs affect people in different ways. And cocaine, in his experience, cocaine does make some people energetic, some people sleepy. It kind of depends on the individual person's physiology. And so these messages go on with Danny just trying to get her home because all this guy wants to do is go to sleep because he's got to get up for work in the morning. And the fact that he does get up for work in the morning at 5:20 is further circumstantial evidence that he was asleep and out of play, was not involved in any way, and had no idea what she had done. 10:45, I love you. Please come back so we can crash together. 10:51, or not. 10:52. I guess I'm going to eat this food and try to stay up for a few. 10:56. I don't want to be tired or you to be tired either. Now, there are a couple, I've taken them out. There are a couple responses from her in here, but they're like one word. They're kind of like stiff arm type responses. Like, leave me alone. I'm not really talking to you. 10:57. And I know you don't feel great. I don't know how you're still up. 11:01. Now, what is this message? This is a good night kiss from Danny. This is Danny giving up on it and going to sleep. I guess I'm not waking up. I'm crashing. You're doing whatever it is that you're doing. I'm going to bed. Now, what is different about this night than all the other nights involving Craig? Again, this is the guy that she's going to for the attention that she needs at a time where she's upset and in a bad state because of the tooth and because of Danny, and she wants to go there and get what she needs and craves. Unfortunately, Craig wasn't there. He told you that. It was unchallenged on a cross-examination. I think Mr. Hilliard just asked him to repeat that. You weren't there? All right. And that's why she's only there for 10 minutes. She was in a bad enough state this night. This was a pop-in. There were no set-up text messages like there had been on other nights. She just drove over there and tried to catch him when he wasn't there. So now she's going home. Hasn't gotten what she needed from Danny and hasn't gotten what she needed from Craig because Craig wasn't there. That was the point of the whole Craig thing, the messages and then putting them up, is just to establish that he wasn't there and he was not able to give her the male attention that she needed. It's not like a character assassination, like, hey, here's some salacious text, let's embarrass her. No, it's part of the story of that night. It helps tell the story of what happened. And so she has to settle for $80 worth of Coke and Percocet from Tim Weston, who also lives out there, of the same family. She goes home and she enters that dining room door at 11:13 p.m. You saw the GPS and everything. It all lines up with this. We don't need to look at that anymore. I think you all got it from the GPS stuff. This is like 15 minutes after Danny's last text to her. The dude is asleep or close to it. And so she's the only one who's up. And she's the only one that's agitated. And she's the only one that hates the kid, that hates Clinton. And she's the only one blowing coke all night and stewing about how unhappy she is and how she's a victim and everybody's mistreating her. Let's talk about we talked about circumstantial evidence. Let's talk about the circumstances of this period of time. 11:13 p.m. till when she's taking Quentin's dead body to a dumpster of Azalea. Like 3 days before, she had typed this search into Safari. Is it common for a mother to have resentment or even anger towards her child because of the father or another reason? That is a circumstance in this case.
If I'm doing pretty good throughout the day and I got a good day overall, and then something like that, slower. Okay, I can feel it. I can feel myself changing the way I talk, the way I think, and opinions. I help everything feel the difference. But when it happens, like they like to be able to feel myself going on, stress, no rushing, whatever. That's just not.
So this is kind of like her baseline behavioral issue, anger issue. She's freely telling the police, I flip out about stuff. If it's been a good day, it might take me a little longer to flip out. But if it's been a bad or stressful day, it can happen like that. Well, this was a bad or stressful day. She had her tooth pulled. She says 1,000,000 times that she was in pain and couldn't sleep. And so this would be one of these days where the snap would happen quickly. This is evidence. Another circumstance is that baseline behavioral anger problem, propensity to snap, is exacerbated by the drug use. Perks, coke, weed. Unhappiness, physical pain, discomfort from the truth. These are the circumstances.
I become angry and impulsive when I'm like.
That's her talking about cocaine. So this is where she was at in that period of time where she's all alone, stewing in her own unhappiness. She says it herself. I was in a lot of high emotion and a lot of pain. So it's under those circumstances that, for reasons known only to her, that she does the unspeakable. All right. The judge will tell you that one of the things we don't have to prove is motive. And the reason for that is that, man, it's really hard to figure out why people do things sometimes. People do stuff that after the fact doesn't make a whole lot of sense, and that they probably wish they hadn't done. So we don't have to prove motive. But it's under these circumstances that she does something unspeakable. And it's literally unspeakable. And that is why she could not bring herself to admit it or tell the truth about it. Because it is an unspeakable thing for a mother to kill her child. But we know she did it in part because everything she does afterwards. Her flashlight is on for 20 seconds at 1 and 2 a.m. And that's because she's creeping around the house, this long route that you have to go to get out this living room door. It's the only time anybody ever uses the living room door. That's her taking Quentin's body out to the car. And she's using that door because it's the furthest one away from Danny, less likely to wake him up and have him say, hey, where are you going? And what is that you're holding in your arms? So she goes out and she puts Quentin in the car. She goes back in and out a couple times at 107 and 110. She's going to want to get some shoes on, get her wallet, because she's very careful about not getting stopped by the police and not drawing any attention to herself on this trip. That brings us to the second trip, the Azalea trip. Now, she would eventually say, when they kind of pinned her down and said, look, we found Quentin now, so we know that you put him in the dumpster because we know where the dumpster went and all that. She would eventually claim, look, I was just so messed up, I don't remember anything. Totally ridiculous claim, especially when you look at what she was able to do and how she was operating that night. It was all very calculated, all right? At least the aftermath, right? 1:13, she plugs her phone into the charger in the car. She's able to do that. At some point in here, she drafts a text message to Danny saying, getting some Orajel. Right, the cover-up starts right away. Getting some Orajel. Now, that message is never sent. That's probably because she made the calculation that, look, that's more likely to make his phone ding and wake him up and draw more attention. I just won't send it, and I'll bank on the fact that I can get out and back without him ever waking up, which is what happened. Unfortunately for her, they were able to find this in her phone. So she knows what she is doing. This is calculated. She turns from Buckhalter onto Ogeechee Road. Hopefully this video will cooperate. This is one we're having a little bit of a problem with. She's coming to a complete stop. She's using her blinker. That's how you want to drive when you have your dead child in the car and you're going the wrong way. You don't want to get stopped for rolling through a stop sign or failing a signal. That's what's going on here. So when she tells you, I just don't remember, don't believe her. Don't believe her. This is that camera that's oriented at the dumpsters, and you can see the headlights up in the top corner. Right, I'm just the top center. Now I've left this whole video in here. I don't know whether I'll play the entire thing, but the reason I left it in here is because it's long. It's like 2 minutes that she sits at that dumpster. You don't need 2 minutes to throw away old food. A story that was always ridiculous and totally transparent. She is sitting there thinking about whether she's really going to do this. Because once you put them in there and you drive off, you can't take them back. That Waste Pro truck is coming, and you made your decision. 2 minutes to think about whether she really wants to throw Quentin, her son, in the garbage, such that he gets crushed into pieces by a compactor in the garbage truck and ground into pieces at the landfill. She thought about it. She thought about it. And she chose to do it. And there was that bit in her October 12th interview with Special Agent Snyder that was so telling. She's given this ridiculous story about throwing away the trash. And he puts in front of her a picture of that camera on the trailer right across from the dumpster that points at the dumpsters. And he asked her, what are we going to see when we pull the footage from this camera? Now, unfortunately, that camera didn't work, despite the best efforts of everybody at Chatham County Police Department, the local FBI office, and the Digital Forensics Analysis Unit. It just didn't have footage for this time period. It was an interior camera that was not ruggedized for the elements in the technical language of Sergeant Coleman. But she doesn't know that. And so she thinks that what she did there was caught on camera. And it's a rare moment of truth because Special Agent Snyder asked her, what are we going to see when we look at that footage? What are we going to see you do? And she tells him, you're going to see me open up the trash, look at it, close it up and put it in the dumpster. Tie it up and put it in the dumpster. And he asks her, it's a sensible question, why? If you're just throwing away old smelly food, why do you need to look at it? She doesn't really have an answer. What she was doing was looking into the face of her dead son, Quentin, one last time, and making a conscious decision to tie him up and throw him away like a piece of trash. That's what that means. So think about that. Think about that, what that would have looked like in that moment, in that bag. It's easy for these things to become abstractions, the Azalea trip, the Origel story. But think about that. That is a real live child. Well, not anymore. That is a real child in a trash bag being thrown away. And she eventually pulls over. When she does that, she commits the offense of concealing the death of another. That's count 4 in the indictment. You conceal the death of another when you unlawfully conceal someone's death in a way that hinders the discovery of whether they were unlawfully killed. And I would say it did hinder the discovery of whether he was unlawfully killed. It took them weeks to find him. And really, the only reason to do that is if you unlawfully kill him. I mean, that is a hell of a thing to do. That is a hell of a thing.
All right, y'all. The way he is lining this out, tells me that the only person that could be guilty of Quentin's murder is Leilani. He is soft-spoken. He's friendly with the jury. All of them. She is the only person that could have done this. You know, and they didn't overcharge her. They're not asking for the death penalty because that's almost impossible to get done in front of a jury. Wouldn't bother me. Old Billy's laying in wait. She should be charged because guess what? She had custody of Quentin and was told not to let Quentin around Leilani. Pretty simple procedure. And some of these people that collected money to go down and support Billy, their toy drives and everything, where did that money go? All in the name of Quentin. Should be ashamed. Shame, shame. Everyone knows your name.
The only reason to do it is if you have to do it to try to get out of a murder charge. If she pulls out, still driving carefully, coming to a complete stop, putting on her turn signal. Anybody who's ever gone out to dinner and had 2 drinks and driven home and just didn't want to take any chances knows exactly what she's doing driving like this. Trying to avoid any attention. The next day, she would talk about a couple times. Once in this interview that you watched, and according to the testimony of Detective Lemons, once when they were outside smoking a cigarette. She talked twice about the importance of the first 24 hours of a missing persons investigation.
Nobody knows it by the time it hits tomorrow morning. You're already past the time when you're most likely to find a missing person. It'll be past after that.
bring that up twice. She's posing it as like it's something that she's worried about, that if they don't find him quickly, that he'll never be found at all. What is going on here is it's exactly the opposite of this. This is not a fear of hers. This is her hope. All right. She might be calculating. She might be manipulative, but she's not necessarily that smart. Okay. She does not understand that when a child goes missing, they pull out all the stops. She seriously underestimated and did not understand the capabilities of people like the Chatham County Police Department and Detective Lemons, agencies like the FBI, Special Agent Snyder, Special Agent Solomon, Special Agent Burns, Detective Noble, Jenny Cox. She didn't understand the commitment of people like Officer Zerke to be out there every day looking for Quentin. She did not understand that all of these people were going to care about Quentin, whom they never met, more than she did. By 1:26 in the morning, she's home and she's unplugging her phone. She's going in that dining room door. 1:39, she goes out again. And then there was this, her phone being unlocked from 1:47 to 2:01, a little less than 15 minutes. The special agent, I asked Special Agent Burns, could you tell what she was doing on her phone at that point? And he said, gosh, I can't say for sure, but it looked like she was scrolling Facebook based on my training and experience, and he's got a lot. She's sitting there on Facebook trying to calm herself down and level out a little bit after doing this thing so that she can go to sleep and pretend like everything's normal and further the cover up in the morning. 2:01, dining room door opens again. 2:04, it opens. 2:36, it closes. And here's what she had to say about that. She says that that's because she was still frantically blowing lines, going outside, smoking cigarettes, smoking weed, coming back in, blow another line, repeat the cycle.
And so you're doing coke, and that's while the back door is opening and shutting.
Somewhere in there, she decides that she needs to go in the kitchen pantry or her closet or wherever she was keeping it and grab this rice cereal and spread it around in the car as part of the cover-up. Some kind of half-baked effort to absorb odor or something like that, throw off the canines or whatever. Like I said, calculated, manipulative, not necessarily smart. She said about this stuff that it had exploded in her car more than a month before, and she had cleaned it up, and she had taken it into the house. I'm sorry, but there is no reason for that stuff to be out on the tiki bar when police show up in the morning, unless she was spreading it around in the car, either in the middle of the night or in the morning before the police got there. That's what we call a clue. She knows what she did. She knew what she did at the time, and she was trying to cover it up. 5:20, Danny gets up and texts the babysitter, hey, the kids are going to stay here with her today, Miss Michelle. Now, there was some effort made in trial to make this look like shady or nefarious on the part of Danny. And sometimes you have a fact like that where initially when you hear it, he texts the babysitter that they're going to stay here. That's maybe a little weird. But then you just ask him, and you get a totally sensible, reasonable answer, which is that he was just sick of her shit. Okay, to put it candidly, he was just sick of it. You're staying up all night doing drugs, not waking up, and running around, not waking up to go to work, and wanting to spend money on a babysitter. That's all this is. And it couldn't have been that abnormal because Michelle's response is not, well, Daniel, this is highly out of the ordinary. There's something going on. And she just says, okay. And he takes this route to work, the most direct route, the quickest route, that does not go by Azalea Mobile Home Plaza. That's the testimony you heard, and we looked at the zoom in and all that stuff. She eventually wakes up, and now it's time to launch the story. And at 9:14, she calls Danny and gives her the whole front door was open, and he's not in his playpen, the abduction story. Danny gets this phone call and runs out of work. He does not know what is going on. He has no idea what she has done. You heard him talk about, and his boss, Dave, corroborated this, that Danny left his North Face jacket and cigarettes there. He would not, you saw Danny. He's a nice enough guy, I guess, but he's not sophisticated enough to know if he was involved in this, that he needs to begin acting before he's ever like home talking to the police. It just would not occur to a guy, if he's somehow involved and is trying to disguise that, to start acting at work before he ever even gets home. He runs out like this because he believes what she is saying. He believes what she is saying. He certainly wants to, he doesn't want to believe that she did anything. So he believes it. That jacket was important to him. He was talking about it. He mentioned the brand twice. It's my North Face jacket, my North Face jacket. It's an expensive jacket. He would not have left this thing there with the cigarettes in it unless this is an organic reaction, a real reaction, a genuine reaction to something that he believed. He doesn't even clock out. Dave Mullins told you that this little triangle up here means that somebody had to manually clock him out. And Dave also told you that he saw him in the parking lot and he was visibly crying. That is real. All of this, Danny told you that he didn't know. That's direct evidence. This is all circumstantial evidence that strongly supports that. There is no reason not to believe him when he says that. 6 or 8 minutes into that phone call, I think it's 8, she opens the front door. I told you were going to see this in the opening statement, and you did. She's on the phone with him saying, the front door was open and Quentin's gone. Meanwhile, she's opening the door and staging the scene. And she wanted to say in those interviews, well, the front door sensor's not working. How do we know? How do we know that that data is reliable? Well, again, the police work in this case is phenomenal. Detective Noble told you he sat down with those records that he got from ADT, and he pulled up the body-worn camera footage of the police officers that responded to the scene, and he looked at the timestamps on the body-worn camera to see when they were opening the door and seeing how firm it was. I think Lieutenant Foster talked about that. And he cross-checks those timestamps in the ADT records. That's evidence. That door sensor was working, and this is exactly what it looks like. This is part of the cover-up. She should have opened the damn door before she called him. Finally, at 9:39, she calls 911. Now, she doesn't want police attention. She's trying to run out a 24-hour clock. That's how she thinks this works. If they don't find him in 24 hours, and pretty much gotten away with it. She doesn't want police attention right away. She only calls the police because Michelle comes over there and tells her, like, you really need to call the police. Your child is gone. And that's when we get into what has a heading in the indictment of the falsehoods on October 5. Now, I typed up this indictment. I called these things falsehoods in there because at the time of indictment, nothing's been proven. And falsehoods sounds a little softer maybe than lies. I'm going to go ahead and call these things lies now. Okay, because we're at the end of this thing and we've proven all of this. The lies on October 5th. Count 5, false report of a crime. She committed this offense by implying that Quentin Simon had been abducted by an unknown intruder. Now, initially, it was just an implication.
I woke up about 9 o'clock, 11:46, so between 3 hour period, somehow the front door is unlocked and the sun is not in this blanket.
She would go on a little later that day to state this a little more directly.
Accident. There was no somebody falling. There was no horse playing. There was no door being looked over and a child walked outside. There was none of that. None of it at all. Then, the whatever happened, somebody picked that baby up out of that blanket and they took him with them. That's what they did. There's no way he can get out of that blanket on his own. No way.
Of course, there's the whole deal with her telling Detective Wilkins that she went to bed at 12 and woke up at 9. So this thing starts falling apart almost immediately.
So when's the last time you saw your child?
When I went to bed last night.
And what time was that? Do you
It was
remember?
around 12.
12? Okay.
12 on but I had my wisdom teeth removed yesterday.
I'm sorry, that's us.
So I went to bed kind of late.
I get you. Listen, I have them too.
So I got up this morning about 9.
Detective Robbins sees the car on the flock camera hitting the previous night, relays that to Lieutenant Foster, and Lieutenant Foster goes and gets the first version of the Origel story.
Okay, so where'd you go?
Right up the road right here, that Chevron. I met my friend that I used to work with. She got worked out there. Her next birthday went home.
You know, as one does, leave your house at 1 in the morning to get a topical oral anesthetic from your friend. And Danny, of course, is looking at her like, what is this woman talking about? I've been home from work for about 3 hours now, maybe 2.5, and I've never heard a word about this. So then they go to headquarters, and she continues the lies of October 5th. Count 6, making a false statement by saying that the purpose of the 204 trip was to pay an existing drug debt, paying off a $20 weed front. We're looking at an $80 cash app, and she later admits that it was for Percocet and cocaine.
And at that point, you didn't get anything.
No, I just paid him $20. I gave him $20 in my life, and it was a couple days ago.
Each one of these lies, on each one of these days, is a separate crime. Count 7, making a false statement for saying that the only controlled substance of which she was a regular user was marijuana. And you'll remember this flowery lie that turned out to be totally untrue, like in a big way.
Like anything, anybody got to worry about anything that really is not me. Because I was the hell was me. I'll be honest about that. Everything else, no. My mom was a drug addict. I watched her be. Because, you know, she covered it from using the fish. So I said, no. Anything that's not homegrown or bought at a convenience store, I don't want. When I mean homegrown, I don't mean cooked on stove. I mean call my herb. I don't want to say homegrown is wrong. Not creative.
Count 8, false statement for saying that the only controlled substance she had used in the past 24 hours was marijuana.
No, I did not. I did not take the Percocet right now. I'll go piss in the cup for you right now.
And then the big one, right? The big one is what she was doing at Azalea after 1 a.m. Count 9, making a false statement that she met Misty at a Chevron service station and had obtained Origel from her.
My mouth was really bothering me about almost 1 in the morning. So they called Circle K to see if they had Origel. No. So I had contact with another one of my friends named Misty that I used to work with. Who has a lot of mouth problems. And asked her if she had any Origel. I met her up there at the Chevron. They ended up calling her and got back and went back home. We also 12 minutes.
In this lie, is for the purpose of committing the offense charged in count 10, false statement by concealing a material fact. Most material fact in the case. That on that trip, she had in fact traveled to Azalea Mobile Home Plaza and there had discarded her son, Quentin Simon, in a dumpster. October 8th, with Bridget Brock, more lies. Count 11. Again, stating that the purpose of the 204 trip was to pay an existing drug debt. Now, I told you in an opening statement that the evidence would show that she just had not had enough time to adjust to the new information of Misty saying, I didn't see her, and the cameras saying, we did. So her only choice at this point, because they confronted her with this like during this interview, is just to double down on it.
He left about 10:30 to 2:04, $20 or maybe 20 bucks. Okay, and who are you paying the $20 to? Red. And what for?
For me.
For when? Okay.
Count 12, false statement for concealing a material fact. The point of that lie was to conceal the fact that she had used controlled substances, that she was in a lot of high emotion and a lot of pain and using cocaine, Percocet, and weed. And again, that's because that circumstance contributed so directly to what she did to Quentin. Count 13, false statement for again stating that the purpose of the Azalea trip was to meet Misty, which again is not even her real name, to obtain Orajel.
Let's talk about that, okay? Because Misty had talked to you.
Yeah, she has.
She hasn't talked to you in quite some time.
Yeah, she has.
She did not have a conversation with you about the Orajel.
Yes.
So in your mind, you looked at all these timestamps and possibly you came up with a story that's partly true.
No, that is
But there's very, very many missing pieces, right? And in your story, you haven't been completely honest about where you were at and why you were
I
there.
was 100% honest. I showed the left 360 and I told him I didn't give him the Orajel that she gave me.
Right, and that didn't happen. We were already interviewing this.
Okay, I got the Orajel. That did happen. She said, I'm moving the side of her mouth and that's the reason why I asked her for it.
You have to stop saying this. It did not happen.
Yes, it did.
And again, the purpose of that is to conceal that material fact, what she was doing there. And we've talked about what that was. October 12th, making a false statement by again saying that what she had done in Azalea was meet Misty for Orajel. And by now the location has changed. It was the Chevron. Now it's, okay, you got me on the cameras at Azalea? All right, fine, I met her at Azalea.
And I did. Yeah, I did.
So it may have been in Azalea, not the Chevron, but I did meet her 100%.
So you went to Missy's house, and did you go inside her house? She was just standing outside.
Yeah, that's not like I got it up.
How long did y'all interact there with Missy? How long did you talk?
2 minutes was quick little conversation. I already went out her mouth. She has some crack and stuff as well. She did. How much she was outside.
A few minutes later,
She got understand. She would have to be 100% true. 100%. That's the only way that we're going to develop.
And speak about it.
That's a big thing.
Yeah.
Because,
If a lot of them will not do it.
yeah, this is what I think. Did you do any work last night?
I didn't do it the other
What
night.
did you do?
But I found it and the card was one of the ones that I lost. And I found my back to the house.
so like 30 minutes, maybe 20 minutes after I did meet Misty 100%. All right, I didn't speak to her, but that's why I went there. It wasn't. Count 16, false statement for saying that all she had discarded was normal household garbage, characterizing her son's dead body, Quentin's little body, as stinky shrimp pasta, which is just disgusting. I mean, if you think about it, it's just disgusting. What a disgusting thing to say.
We gave us just money from the trash, this family was taking trash off 2 days ago, and there's spoiled food all in my car. And so when I pulled around, I said, yeah, I stopped the food. And it was foiled like shrimp pasta. Yeah. The whole car smelled like shrimp. And I waited to take it out. I was like, this smell. I felt that before I went to go to a floor. You know, I didn't know that before. And I'm like, get out of the car. And I was like, it was stop. It was going to stop. But I didn't think anything of it. To be honest, it's just all food. Help for the car. See an opportunity I put it out.
Just didn't think about it. That's why I didn't mention it over the previous 5-6 hours of interviews. I didn't think anything of it. And of course, she's still concealing that material fact that she had discarded her son Quentin Simon in a dumpster, like a piece of trash. October 31st, time to try something new. Danny's left town by this point. Who wouldn't? You know, that was characterized as some sort of suspicious activity on his part. This is a guy who had no connection to Savannah other than her. The relationship was already falling apart. This is a difficult woman to live with and to be in a relationship with. And by this, you know, now he knows that she's killed her child. It doesn't take him that long to figure that out, even if he didn't want to believe it initially. So he goes home to his parents' house. Who wouldn't? All right, so now, by the time October 31st rolls around, hey, Danny's gone, screw Danny, I'll put it on him. And that starts with that text message to Special Agent Solomon on October 24th, and then that's made official in this October 31 interview. I'll tell you something about this count right now. It says that she made this statement to Detective Lemons, Special Agent Solomon, and Special Agent Snyder. I think the only one who testified about being a part of this interview was maybe Lemons and Solomon. When we have people like that joined with Ann in the indictment, we say she made this false statement to all three of these people. Even if the evidence only shows that it was made as one, like only one person testified of the three that they were the recipient of the statement, you can and should still convict on that count. Even if if you look at it, it's like, well, that person didn't say they were there for it. You can still convict on that count. You should still convict on that count, because even if you were to omit the other person from the count, it's still a lie. It's still a lie. So sometimes we charge things with the word "and" between them, but you should read it as "or." You can read it as "or." We do it that way for technical legal reasons that I won't get into. We have to charge it with "and," so we put them on notice of anybody that we might prove the count as to. But you can read the "and" in there as "or," and you should read it as "or." And I think I saw somebody write that down. I'm glad for that. Another thing about like technical aspects of charges, these charges have Special Agent Brad Snyder as Bradford. That's his full first name. I don't know that came out on the witness stand. Little things like that do not require you, do not prevent you from convicting on a charge. A little thing like the person's name, first name, whether it's Brad or Bradford, is not a material allegation in the charge. So little things. I mean, if it said somebody else entirely, if it said it was actually Joe Smith, and that guy never testifies, that's a problem. But if he said on the stand that his name is Brad, and the indictment says Bradford, you don't need to get wrapped around the axle all the time. So anyway, she makes this false statement. It was not her, but rather Daniel Youngkin who drove to Azalea and disposed of Quentin's body. Now, that doesn't make sense for 100 reasons. One being that she'd already admitted to making that trip and given a false alibi for it, a false explanation for it, like 15 times. And later, in her last interview on November 21, she would once again admit to it. But here's something even a little more probably direct than that. That same day that she comes in and says that to them, that it was actually Danny, she has this call with Danny because he's still entertaining her phone calls and things, even if they're not really together. And he asks her, "Where did you go when you left the house?" And she says, "Like I said, I went to get Orjo." She doesn't say, "What are you talking about, dummy? That was you. Remember, I was supposed to lie for you." She just once again admits on the same day that she's telling law enforcement that it wasn't her. She's admitting to Danny at a time where she doesn't think the police are listening, that it was actually her.
So what did you do when you went out after I fell asleep? I went to someone and got over.
That call is just not going to. That call is just not going to sound like that. Therefore, October 31st statement is true. One, Danny's not going to be asking her, "What did you do?" And two, she's not going to be answering that question. She's going to be disputing the premise of it. So let's talk a little bit more about Danny. I talked to you earlier about some reasons that you could look at the circumstantial evidence in this case and the direct evidence of his testimony and her statements to know that. But there's some other things. She is telling him the same, throughout this thing, she's telling him the same lies that she's telling the police. And she's lying to him about what the FBI and police are telling her.
Why did you lie? I did not lie to you about Oreo. So you went and met this? Yes. I drove in and I drove out. And they tried to say that again. I asked them to show me the picture of Mr. Oreo. And you like, y'all speak to my phone lady. Did you speak to her? Did you speak to her husband? She said, I wanted to. You know? And they said, her husband. Why didn't you speak to her?
Nobody ever told her that they had only spoken to Misty's husband. She's lying to him, just like she lied to everybody throughout this case. And if he knew anything or had anything to do with it, their interactions in the hotel room just would not look like this. She would not have to lie to him. She would only have to lie to the police, to the FBI. Like a half hour later, she tells a different lie. The first one was, "Hey, they told me that they only spoke to her husband." And now she says, "Yeah, my impression was that they talked to her and she corroborated my story."
Like you went and met Missy. Wait a minute, Missy. Got Oreo. And you said it's all? I think so, yes. What did she say? And she confirmed it. She confirmed it? I'm pretty sure, yes. It's not like they sat there and told me what was said. Oh, but they said that they spoke Missy and they didn't touch me no more about the Oreo. Oh, okay.
This is the day of that interview with Bridget Brock. They said that they talked to Misty and then they didn't question me anymore about the Oreo. That is not an accurate characterization of that interview at all. She's lying to him just like she's lying to the police and FBI. This guy didn't know anything. He didn't have anything to do with it. You heard from him directly. And one of the things the judge is going to instruct you on is how to evaluate the credibility of witnesses. And it's got a number of factors, this instruction, things for you to consider. The most important as they apply to Danny are his manner of testifying and his personal credibility as you observe. We would submit to you that he came in here and was just an open book, a guy doing his level best to tell you the truth. And there's some things about his manner of testifying that give that impression. One is he's not hiding anything. He's not covering anything up. I asked him, and this was not like rehearsed or anything. I asked him about the alcohol in the car and whether he would ever drink and drive. And he's on the stand under oath, essentially admitting to a crime. Yeah, unfortunately, at that point in time, I would do that sometimes. Mr. Hilliard on cross-examination asked him some question to the effect of, you tried to say you were the responsible person in the home. And he corrects Mr. Hilliard. Whoa. I never said I was responsible. He's taken ownership of his role in, creating a certain environment in that house and certain behaviors. But he did not have anything to do with this. And he did not know anything about it. And it's kind of a shame what has happened to him, the effort that was made by her during the investigation for like a minute there to try to throw it on him. And some of the insinuations about him that have been made during this trial, and that might be made again in the defense closing argument. But you can assess Amy's credibility and consider the fact that he's corroborated by all of the circumstantial evidence in this case. One circumstance is that he was talking for like 2 months or so on a regular basis with 2 very experienced and savvy FBI agents, Special Agent Snyder and Special Agent Solomon. These people know what they're doing. Like Special Agent Snyder said, the FBI has all these sophisticated techniques and resources and all that stuff. They love that word, resources. But at their core, what do? They talk to people. And they had extensive, it's not just his demeanor in the interviews. I asked those questions, what was his demeanor like in the interviews? And it occurs to me, having heard all the evidence, that I think I might have been missing the point a little bit, and that's a little too narrow. It's everything that he did and said over like 2 or 3 months that convinced them at every turn that he had nothing to do with this and no knowledge of it. He is not capable of pulling that off if it's not true. He is not capable of conning Special Agent Snyder and Special Agent Solomon. He ain't that guy. Probably nobody is. And that brings us to the day of arrest, lies on November 21. After giving all of these detailed stories and changing the details whenever that became necessary, the weight of the bag, how exactly she threw it in, the exact amount, the color of the ties on the bag, all that stuff. Now, it's I just don't remember at all. I don't remember anything from when I got home from 204 and saw Quentin safe in the crib to when I was driving home from Azalea and hit the railroad tracks and jerked back into, forming memories, I guess. Just totally absurd. Totally contrary to all these detailed cover stories she'd given to that point. And contradicted even in this interview. There's this line of questioning where Detective Lemons asks her, was Quentin in the trash bag? And she says, well, there were actually 2 trash bags, which is a new fact. Yet another change. Even on the final day, she's still changing things. And then Detective Lemons says, is that what Quentin was in? Or did you use a bag to dispose of Quentin? She says, I don't remember grabbing a bag. I was focused on throwing away the trash. So there's 2 things going on here. One is that she is admitting that she remembers what she did with Azalea. It was like 30 minutes after she said, I just have no memory. And she's now describing details again. And 2, she's more or less admitting that, I threw Quentin in the dumpster. That's the only way to hear this. This is the closest you're gonna get to a confession from this woman. All right, you can read this as a confession to concealing Quentin's death by throwing him in the dumpster.
What's the last thing you remember before? And then it goes to turning back to Zoe. Did you see him in the bed right when you got home, or something? Like you came in and did it lying and you saw him? So what that was like the where you got home for that ride trip. And that's what's the memory of all of that night. You remember? And then, yeah.
So that was actually, I got my clips mixed up. That's actually just like the main story. That's the story for that day. I just don't remember 2-hour gap in memory. And then this is the bit about the trash bags. And what I'm urging you to view is something like a confession, the closest that you're going to get from this person.
Just story with Stan and Brad.
There was not a trash there.
Is that what Quentin was like?
Before there was like 2 nights later, I should remember. It was so big. When I was trying to get ready.
Did you use a trash bag?
I don't recall, but I had a trash bag on the house.
And then there's this. This also is something like a confession that she did at the dumpster, what she's charged with doing.
Let me show you something. It's gonna help with what Helen's asking right now. This is a very fraction, small fraction of the mountain. What that looks to get home is trash. And everything to the left and right of that is trash. You see how little those people are? Do you think that we could have found him if we didn't know that you put him in the dumpster and we knew exactly where that dumpster went?
So that brings us back to the beginning of the indictment. We've made it through the end. I want to go back to the beginning and talk about the murder charges. Okay, because this is not just a concealing the death case. This is not just a false statements case. It's not really a false report of a crime case. It's a murder case. She killed Quentin. So I do need to talk to you a little bit about murder. Now, one of the things the court is going to tell you, the judge will instruct you on this, that crimes have what are called essential elements. Those are the things that we have to prove. The essential elements of a crime. And it's actually a very short list, right? So bullet points. We have to prove that she caused the death of her son, Quentin Simon, a human being, that she did it unlawfully. And this word is not really in play in this case. It just means like it's no case where there's a defense to the killing, like self-defense or defense of others or something like that. And for malice murder, count 1, we have to prove that she did it with malice aforethought. Now, we have to talk about malice a little bit, okay? What it is and what it isn't. You might hear it and think, well, doesn't malice mean to hate somebody? Well, first of all, there's some evidence of that in this case. But it's a legal term. It's a technical term. And the judge will tell you it is not necessarily ill will or hatred. Rather, it is simply the unlawful intent to kill. You may find malice when the circumstantial evidence show that the defendant acted with the deliberate intention to unlawfully take the life of another person. State does not have to prove premeditation to prove murder. Perhaps in some states you do, but in Georgia, the state does not have to prove premeditation to prove malice murder. If a killing is done with malice, again, just simply the intent to kill, that's it. It is murder regardless of how briefly the malicious intent existed. No specific length of time is required for malice to arise in the defendant's mind. Malice may be formed in a moment. If malice was in the defendant's mind at the time of the act or killing, that is enough for the killing to be murder. Malice may be express or implied or both. You may imply malice when all the circumstances of the killing show an abandoned and malignant heart. The judge will also tell you on the issue of intent that you can infer that people intend the natural and probable consequences of their actions. And if you make an assault on a 20-month child that is enough to kill them, and she did, you can infer that she intended to do it. You don't get to smother her baby or punch a toddler, I should say, or punch a toddler in the abdomen such that it lacerates his liver or something like that, or strangle a 20-month-old toddler, and then say, well, I didn't mean to kill him. The only way to kill a healthy 20-month-old child is on purpose, straight up. Manner of death is not an element of the crime. I imagine that the defense is going to say, well, gosh, they can't even tell you how it happened. Manner of death is not an element. We do not have to prove exactly how she did it, and in this case, how could you? She covered it up. She threw him in a dumpster so that he got ground up into little pieces. And now she wants to come in and say, can't catch me, you don't know how I did it. It is not an element that we need to prove. All the facts show that her intent was that he never be found at all, right? And that she had to just forevermore be the sympathetic mother of a missing child. Maybe go on, Dr. Phil every 5 years and appeal to the public for his return. And the next best thing for her, in her mind, is that he be so torn apart that the experts, despite their best efforts, can't tell exactly how she did it. But it doesn't matter because we don't have to prove it. And that is a sensible rule. That is a sensible rule. And I'll tell you this, if you get wrapped around the axle on that, you go back there and you say, well, gosh, how can we ever know? You are getting played in the worst way. You are getting absolutely played. If you do that, you're bringing her plan to completion. You are telling her, hey, great job. You did a good enough job with the cover-up that you get to skate. Nobody likes to get played. Don't get played. There are 2 other murder counts on the indictment. Both of them are felony murder. Felony murder does not require the intent to kill. It just requires that you cause somebody's death in the course of committing a felony. Those 2 felonies, the first one is aggravated assault. You know what an assault is. It's just any kind of attack on a person of any sort. An aggravated assault is an assault that's done with an object that, when used defensively against a person, did result in serious bodily injury. And it did result in serious bodily injury because Quentin is dead. The identification of what the object was is not an element. The object in this context can be anything. And there are 100 cases from the Georgia Supreme Court saying as much. It can be your hands, it can be your feet, it can be a pillow, it can be the side of the pack and play, the corner of the pack and play. It can be your fist, it could be a blunt object that you pick up, it could be a sheet, it could be a blanket. The only way that he's dead is if she made an assault on him with an object of some nature. And we do not have to prove what it is. People do not do this sort of thing in front of witnesses, and they don't like to talk about it. Count 3, felony murder, is based on the felony of cruelty to a child in the first degree. You commit cruelty to a child in the first degree when you cause cruel and excessive physical pain to a child. What counts as cruel or excessive physical pain? There's no legal definition of what counts as cruel or excessive. That's for you to decide. And this is pretty straightforward here, right? The thing that she did to him was enough to cause him to die. It hurts to die. Right, so she committed this felony. This count also, it has the word malicious in it. It says maliciously causes cruel or excessive physical pain. It's a different meaning of malice from in the context of malice murder, where it means intent to kill. Here it just means it wasn't an accident. Whatever you did on purpose. It wasn't an accident. And as with the previous two counts, the specific manner of the infliction of the pain, how exactly she hurt him, is not an element. It's not something that we have to prove. So, nobody wants to believe that a mother would do this. This unspeakable thing. Nobody wants to believe. You'd bend over backwards to believe it was anything but an intentional killing or an intentional assault that resulted in his death. The police did not want to believe that. But the problem is all the evidence. Right? The problem is all the evidence. The police looked at every possibility. Right? There are only so many ways to die. There are only so many ways a healthy, robust toddler can die. If you have kids, you know that at 20 months old, at nearly 2, a little kid is like a bowling ball. They're tough. They're resilient. They don't just die. It takes something happening. I mean, yeah, there's like car accidents and things like that. That's not what we're talking about here. They ruled out accident. They asked her 100 times whether there was some kind of accident. Tell us. If there was, tell us. And she never would, because the truth was unspeakable. All of her actions after the fact, immediately after the fact, the flashlight, the living room door, all that stuff, not yelling and saying, oh, something happened. Danny, help me. Clinton's not breathing. All that stuff, everything she did is totally incompatible with there having been some sort of accident. In her final interview on November 21st, when she's been told that she knows she's being arrested for murder. For murder. This is like interview number 15. Now would be the time, if it was anything but that, anything but murder, anything but an intentional killing, anything but an intentional assault that resulted in his death, now would be the time to say it. And she doesn't, because that's not what happened. This investigation ruled out an accident. The evidence ruled out accident. This is something that they would have been happy to hear had it been true. There was no medical event. That's something that people, you're looking at a charge like this, it's natural to look at a way out of it. Is there some other way we can go to avoid this conclusion? Nobody wants to believe this. Well, they looked into that. They got all of his medical records for his whole short life. Right? All of Quentin's medical records. And we put in front of you 2 doctors who had like the most direct treatment of him and the most recent in time to when he was killed. This is like a combined 60 years of medical experience. And they said, no. If you're looking for an out there, you're barking up the wrong tree. It wasn't that. Dr. Quinta said Quentin was thriving. And Dr. Birch told you how minor and unconcerning these things were. It was not some random freak medical event that just so happened to occur in the context of all those circumstances with what was going on with her that night. No SIDS. You might find yourself wanting to go down the, well, don't kids just sometimes die route to avoid calling this what it is? There's no SIDS. Way too old for that. Dr. Darasol told you that. SIDS has a lot to do with little tiny kids having a hard time, rolling and getting away from something that's obstructing their airflow and things like that. It's way too big for that. Way too big, way too strong. There's no accidental overdose. That was a possibility that was suggested by some lines of questioning, cocaine and so forth. One, it seems like they were, actually fairly careful with that, and it's expensive, and you're not going to lay it around and so forth. Then you heard from a forensic toxicologist, right? Who looked at a bunch of stuff and didn't detect any of that on or in anything, including Quentin's brain tissue. Right, so they looked at all this stuff, and there are only so many ways to die. This was murder. There is nowhere else to go. This was murder. She killed him. Now, here's an instruction that we really need to talk about in this case. Voluntary intoxication is not a defense. It is not a defense to a crime if you became intoxicated on purpose and then committed a crime. And that's a lot of what is going on here. She's essentially saying that is what happened. That is classic voluntary intoxication. Getting so fucked up that you do something. You don't get to drive drunk and wipe out a family of 4 and come out of your blackout. And she wasn't blacked out. She's lying about that. And say, oh, my bad. You guys didn't know I was drunk. And then the court system says, oh, you were drunk? Oh, man, let's forget about it. That's not how it works. That would be crazy if that were how it worked. A huge percentage of people that commit murder are under the influence of something. But you're responsible for your own actions. And by the way, if you're intoxicated to the point that it's impacting your faculties, and what comes out is that you murder that child that you don't like, that was in there somewhere. Some people think the truth comes out when you're intoxicated. That was in there somewhere. This is not a defense. So let's just look at a couple of clips of the most she could say in her defense in this case.
What do you think people are going to say when it comes out that time?
God knows exactly what I'm saying.
I can see that.
There's no intention on it. It's not that I was planned out. It's not like I wanted to.
Lack of premeditation and it having been an impulsive thing is not a defense to murder. Most murders are impulsive, snap decisions. Every now and then you have a cold, calculated hit by like a contract killer or something like that. Most murders are just somebody snapping and killing somebody. And malice can be formed in an instant. There is nothing about what she's saying here that makes this anything other than murder. And this sounds like a confession to the state.
I don't know. I wasn't alone. I wish I was alone. I don't know if I did something to him. But if I did, I'll take my responsibility. I'll take my responsibility. I'm hoping to God. And I'll come home with him alive and fill my arms. That's what I want.
She said a number of times that if it came out that she did it, if the evidence showed that she did it, that she would take her responsibility. And it's time for that now. We are there.
And if something does come up,
Ooh, I have to interrupt. There's been a lot of information that has come through in the last, almost 2 weeks. They might as well go ahead and send her straight to the pen. They might as well do it because she has admitted it. She won't say what she did. And the question is, why did Billy keep her around? Why? Is she that much of a bleeding heart? Is she that much of a wonderful mother that just enables her daughter to no end to the point that she doesn't care what happens to her grandchildren or thinks the unthinkable could never happen? I don't know. I'm not in Billy's life. I'm not in Billy's mind. And it's really crazy that people are saying this can happen to anyone. No, it can't. No, it freaking can't. Your child has an issue taking care of your grandchild, and the state says you're now in charge. Then you're in charge. You don't let the problem back in. No one would think that was proper to do. No one. And Billy can work her ass off if she wants. Doesn't matter. But she's on the rugs too. She was partying with her daughter. Danny's paying for daycare, paying Billy rent. Did anyone say a word to Danny? But hey, by the way, didn't know if you know this, but actually my mom has custody of Zane and Quentin. Just so you know, you don't need to pay daycare for them. And they drum up these people from the church that they swear they don't know that live right across the goddamn street and say, well, I didn't know him. I just got this name from church. No, you already knew him. And then you go off and you party. You don't show up at court. You're bragging in these channels about how you don't have to testify. We have channels saying that all of us need to apologize to Billy. Apologize to Quentin. Apologize to him. She's standing right next to her daughter. And this was weeks after she knew that Quentin was being searched for in a landfill. Crazy.
Yeah, I am at fault. I will take myself to that police station.
The evidence has proven that she's responsible. It has proven her guilt. And it is time for her to take responsibility for it. I put this picture up here because I think it kind of captures what happened in this case. Law enforcement searched through tons of garbage, through a great deal of garbage to find the truth in this case. Both the searchers at the landfill, who broke their backs out there day in and day out, and in a more figurative sense, the interviewers who had to sift through all of the garbage that she was throwing at them the whole time. They did their job. You know, the police come in for some criticism, and you know, that's a complex conversation, good points to be made on both sides. But what everybody can agree on is that the police should be looking for missing children and trying to hold those responsible to account, trying to figure out who did it. And they did their job in this case. They sifted through the garbage and they found the truth. We have done our best as a prosecution team to present the truth to you in a clear and organized manner. It's a difficult thing to do when you have an investigation that is this thorough and this broad-ranging to come in and present everything that matters to a jury in a way that makes sense. And we've tried to do that. We've tried to show you the truth and to not waste your time. Now is your turn to find the truth, to look for the truth, to speak the truth. You may recognize these words, you may not. These are the last couple of words from the oath that you took when you were sworn as jurors. And you promised to a true verdict give according to the evidence. And a true verdict give according to the evidence. So help you God. That's what you had to promise to do. Now, Quentin is gone. He is not coming back. Depending on what you believe, Quentin is either with God or his short life on earth was all he ever had. I know what I prefer. He is gone. There's really nothing we can do for him. The only thing we can do, really, the only thing you can do in any murder case, the only thing we can do to honor his memory is to just simply tell the truth about what happened to him. Tell the truth about what happened to him. And don't perpetuate the defendant's lies that this was anything but murder. I expect that you're going to hear about the burden of proof in the defense closing argument and the concept of reasonable doubt, and when all the evidence is against you. Really, the only play is to argue the burden of proof and talk about reasonable doubt and hope somebody gets wrapped around the axle. The judge will give you the instruction on reasonable doubt, and you'll see that the words common sense are right in there. Common sense are in there. It's right in there. That's the core of what it's all about, is just getting back there and applying your common sense. And we are confident that if you go back in the jury room and you apply your common sense in this case, that you'll return a verdict that speaks the truth about what you did to Quentin. Thank you.
My preference to go directly into defense closing argument. I believe this is a good time for a break. So let's, the time now is 11:36. Let's take about a 15-minute break. Let's come back ready to get started at 11:50. All right.
Jurors exiting. All clear, Judge.
All right, thank you. Everyone, please have a seat. Before we break, I kept time at about 1 hour, 28 minutes. Okay. All right, and then we'll come back at 11:50 to resume. All right, we're in recess.
All right. She's done. And look, the jury hasn't sat there long enough that they can't hear the other statement. I mean, how long did they even speak? Baby Kisses said, "Judge looks sad." She does. She does. She looks PO'd. They should have kept going. Preschool Granny said, what did I miss? They just laid out all the evidence again. They did. And what is the defense exactly going to say to rebut all of the evidence that's been laid out? The judge said everyone has 2 hours. So they're going to have everyone take a break so he can continue with 30 more minutes. And how long can the defense really talk? In my opinion, that closing was great. I thought it was very important. I thought it was outstanding. And I thought the way he laid everything out for the jury isn't anything that the defense can argue. What do they say? Defense wins ball games, though. Britt. Britt said it left me with no reasonable doubt. Not me either. Times, dates, her. All of the above. What is this? Hang on. If that's another Jehovah's Witness, I'm going to lose my damn mind. I get really tired of that shit. So I don't know. How long are they going to be on break, my friends? Let me look. What, 15 minutes? All right, let's go back to this video then.
Buckhalter. And you can also see a little bit of 17.
And what time is this footage from?
The timestamp says 1:16 and 15 seconds on Wednesday.
October 5th, 2022.
Yes.
All right. And what are we going to see in this clip?
You're going to see a vehicle pass through your view on the road.
On which road is it going to be on initially?
Buckhalter.
And what direction is it going to be traveling?
It's going to be traveling northbound or towards Ageechee Road.
And when it hits that intersection of Buckhalter and Ageechee Road, what is it going to do?
It will take a right.
And what type of vehicle does it appear to you to be?
It appears to be a Dodge Journey, a light colored Dodge Journey.
Now, this series of video clips is in chronological order of when the events occurred, correct?
Yes, sir, they are.
So at this point, that Dodge Journey is taking a right onto Ageechee Road from Buckhalter Road, right?
Yes, it is.
All right, moving to slide 18, we see the two source buildings marked again. In slide 19, this shows the first the position and orientation of the first camera that we're gonna see footage from, correct?
Yes, sir, it does.
Now, can we see the overhang for the
Okie doke. Let's look at this from Jean Ellen. Well, there was 2 bags. I'll agree. Confession. Yeah. I'm telling you. Without confessing, she did confess. She did. And I want to say thank you really quick to Go Buck a Fuckalo. Love that. Thank you for being a member for a month. GB Folk, thank you for donating a Crime Lines and Lies membership. Angel P, my girl, donated a Crime Lines and Lies membership. Mary is a new member. Now, we're going to be on verdict watch once the defense gets done. But I am planning for a members live tomorrow. If you're not a member, please be a member. Who's up for a members live tomorrow? They're always a ton of fun. Stacy, thank you for the super sticker. Shonda, I'm gonna spank you for that super sticker. Thank you so much to Robin, $1 for. Thank you so much, baby. And I feel really bad when Robin puts money to donate to the channel to keep it going, because she is a true crime victim herself. Debbie said, I can't wait for tomorrow. Me either. Yeah, we have a very special birthday. One of our friends is turning the big 4-0.
Chevron pumps up there in the top left area?
Yes, sir, in the top right, top left.
And are those some U-Hauls next to that, kind of reflecting?
Yes, I think at the time they were running U-Hauls at that establishment.
In that timestamp that says 23:56, that's 80 to 81 minutes slow, correct?
Yes, sir.
So if it says 23:56 and you add 80 to 81 minutes, you get like 1:17 a.m. or so
Yes, sir.
on October 5th, 2022, right?
Yes, sir.
And what is this clip going to show?
It's going to show a vehicle approach from the left side of the screen, and then it will make a right-hand turn on the entrance to Azalea Mobile Home Park.
Does it appear to be the same vehicle as in the last clip we just watched?
It does.
And this would have been just seconds after that clip we just watched, correct?
Yes, sir.
Now, slide 21, this signifies the camera pointing the other way.
Yes, sir, it does.
And I think you mentioned earlier that a vehicle driving into Azalea would pass through the field of view of the camera we just watched footage from into the field of view of this camera.
Yes, sir.
Now, the next slide, what are we going to see here?
You're going to see a vehicle enter from the right-hand side of the screen and then go all the way across the screen and exit the left-hand side of the screen.
Now, we looked at that image earlier of that right turn that you can take with the red arrows.
Yes, sir.
And can you see that street where you would take a right? That's in this frame. Is it
Yes,
not?
sir, it does.
Does the vehicle take a right on that road or not?
No, it does not.
And does the vehicle that we're about to see seem to be the same one from the previous vehicle? Is that
It
the
seems
previous-
To myself, it seems to be the same vehicle.
Yeah, this clip would just be like a second or two after that one.
Yes.
Same vehicle.
The,
driving on
the
same-
cameras are right next to each other.
Now, you mentioned earlier that if you drive in this way that we've just watched this car do, you can make a loop and take that one-way exit road.
Yes, sir. It's a loop. There's several roads that bisect it, but you have to go to that other road to exit.
Is this, the way we just saw this car drive, is that the way that you would drive to make that loop
Yes,
that takes you past the dumpsters and to that one-way exit road?
that is the full loop. Yes, sir.
Now, what is this here?
Appears to be a still image of the vehicle that we just watched on the video.
And what is this next slide here, slide 24?
This is a Dodge Journey that is sitting in, I believe, the technical garage of the FBI building.
Is that the Dodge Journey that was towed from 535 Buckhalter?
Yes, sir, it is.
Does that Dodge Journey that was towed from the house and photographed at the FBI office, does that appear to be consistent with the vehicle that we're seeing in this security footage?
Yes, sir, it does. I pay particular attention to what we call the back part. If you can see the slant and the angle, there's certain things you look at when you've been looking at cars for a very long time on video that you try to key in on, even though the video is somewhat pixelated. The tire, the area of the tire appears to be the same. The angle of the light appears to be the same.
Now, this next slide, slide 25, this signifies the location of that camera that catches the dumpsters in the top of the front field of view.
Yes.
Now, what are we going to see here?
So what you're going to see here is you're going to see some brightness, and I'll stand up.
Sure, yeah.
You're going to see some brightness. Again, I'll bring your attention to this cat skid steer. Here's the fallen down traffic sign. Again, you're looking in this area right here. And that's kind of orientates you.
And you said you're going to see some brightness. Does it appear to you to be vehicle headlights?
Yes, it does.
And are those vehicle headlights moving continuously throughout this video clip or not?
No, sir, they're not.
Can you tell us for about how long they appear to be stationary?
I think I said earlier, I misspoke. I believe it's probably around 2 minutes, 2 minutes, 15 seconds, something like that.
And based on the pictures that we've looked at so far, what area of the Azalea Mobile Home Plaza do those apparent vehicle headlights appear to be stationary at for 2 minutes or so?
Judging by where they're stationary and knowing what I knew from the white vehicle being parked there, I believe it to be in the area of the dumpsters.
Now, initially, when you're just seeing headlights stationary in the area of the dumpsters, are you able to tell what vehicle that is at that point?
No, sir.
Is there a point in this video clip where you do get a good look at that vehicle?
Yes, sir. I believe so. If the jury remembers, I spoke of a hurricane fence and the slats going through them. These are, angled green slats. We've probably all seen them at construction sites. It's supposed to somewhat obscure what's behind the fence. But when a vehicle or when anything is moving behind it, you get an idea better when that object is moving. So you'll see right in here.
What is the vehicle doing at that point? Which direction is it headed? What road is it on? And so
It's headed towards the exit.
is it on that one-way exit road you described?
Yes, sir, it is.
Okay, that runs along the top side of that yard.
Yes, sir, it does.
Now, when you get a look at it at that point, does it appear to you to be the same vehicle that we've been seeing in all these other video clips?
It does.
With that preview, I'll go ahead and play the video clip on slide 26 here. Now, at this point, we're about halfway into this video clip. At this point, do those headlights appear to be stationary in the area of the dumpsters?
Yes, sir.
When they appear to start moving to you and making that movement that you were describing to us, will you just let us know and kind of narrate to us?
Okay, we are back. I did not mean to mute myself. Again, thank you for all the love. Maisie gifted 5 Crime Lines and Lies memberships, left a super sticker. You guys are making me blush. DT Driver said, what charges are they pursuing? Murder. Murder. All right, here we go.
Okay, we are back on the record in SPCR 22-03364J6. Let the record reflect that counsel for both parties are present. Ms. Simon is present with her counsel. And at this point, is the state ready to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor.
I saw the little side look. I know you've already done your part. And Mr. Hilliard, are you ready to proceed?
We're ready to proceed.
All right, very good. Please bring in the jury.
Jurors entering.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, please have a seat. And members of the jury, have you been able to follow the court's instructions? Have there been any discussions about the case? Have you overheard discussions about the case or done any research?
Your Honor.
With that, I will turn to Mr. Hilliard.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good almost afternoon. Thank you for your time. It seems like a lifetime ago, back on October 9th, when we started to select this jury. And back then, we asked a bunch of questions. And the most important of which was whether or not you could set aside your feelings and your emotions and be a fair and impartial juror, to which all of you said you could. The reason why I bring that up now is because of something the state just said about the burden of proof. The burden of proof is the requirement. The state has to overcome the burden of proof. Okay, they hate it. They have complete and utter disdain for it, which is why Mr. Dean used the term wrapped around the axle, as if you hold the state to their burden of proof that there's something wrong with you, that you're not normal or straight, or you're getting twisted. That's not really how our system of government and our court systems work. We selected you, and you are the perfect jurors for this case. We're not asking you to set aside your life experiences. We're not asking you to set aside your feelings or anything like that. You were selected for who you are and your unique experiences by both me and the state of Georgia. In that regard, you are the perfect jury to consider this case. Now, and I say that, and during the course of this, there is nothing personal between Mr. Dean or Ms. Parker or myself or Mr. Purse or Ms. Lemons or any of the witnesses. But it's an adversarial system, okay? I am their adversary. It is my job to stand up and defend my client, Ms. Simon's, rights. And it is my job to hold the state to their burden of proof. I don't take that task lightly. And it's been my job to do that since we began. Now, what happens next is I take that responsibility and I turn it over to you. And I'm going to start with my biggest fear. And my biggest fear is this case deals with so much emotion. It has from the beginning. I don't think that's an overstatement or an understatement. And I know there were times during the course of this trial where every single one of us felt something deep down inside of us. On more than one occasion, we've seen witnesses break down, seen jurors break down. It's a serious matter. But the law gives us guidance on what we're supposed to do when that happens. When it comes to emotion, the law says that the case must not be decided for or against anyone because you feel sorry for anyone or you're angry at anyone. Your verdict is to be based on evidence. It's not to be based on emotion. And in times during the course of this trial, the emotion was directly pointed at you. How could it be otherwise? And I think that it's important for all of us to acknowledge that. There were things that were done to draw your emotion up, to play upon your emotions, to manipulate and twist your emotions. Things to get you angry, things to get you upset, things to dehumanize Miss Simon. Things to get you to make judgments about her that have nothing to do with the evidence in the case. Now, I wasn't the one doing this, but these things were done. And to pretend that they were not is just not accurate. You heard a lot from witnesses. And I'm going to talk about, there's basically 4 types of witnesses. And I like to identify them because it's up to you to determine, just like Mr. Dean said, the manner and method of testifying, what type of witnesses they are. As a defense lawyer, I basically put them down into 4 different types. Number 1 is a police witness. Police witness can be unbiased or biased. It basically depends. I mean, to be quite fair, a police witness is paid government money to investigate and prosecute crimes. Some of them think they have to put their fingers on the scales. Other ones don't, but they're police witnesses. That's kind of one of the first categories I put them in. The second one is the civilian witness. Of course, that's an easy one. Bernard Johnson, Waste Pro, those guys. They're just a civilian witness to get called into the investigation. Paul Simon, one of my personal favorite, a civilian witness. Miss Bowling, civilian witness. Then there's what I call like a fact witness, someone that you would normally never hear from, but they just have some sort of fact to give. They can be civilian or they can be police. In this particular case, I would say any of the forensic examiners kind of fall in that category. And the final one is what I basically would call a sock puppet. A sock puppet witness is somebody, and it's usually a police investigator or someone like that, who basically gets up and wants to parrot what the state's theory is. Now, in this particular case, emotions were very high. I don't think that's an extravagant statement. And a lot of the witnesses are going to say, well, this didn't conform to normal, or this wasn't right, or basically, she reacted differently. That's not what the law calls for. The law calls for you to base your verdict on evidence. Okay? And the reason it's my biggest fear you're going to base it on emotion or something that's not completely or at all relevant to the issue is it's difficult to push these feelings aside. It's difficult to put this prejudice aside. And it's difficult to look at evidence, especially in a case dealing with a dead 20-month-old. I cannot think of a harder case to do it in. Now, Quentin Simon was a sweet, innocent child. I don't think anyone said anything different. He died far too young. I don't think anyone said anything different. And if I have, to any extent that you've maybe thought that that's where I was going with that, I apologize. I never, ever, ever meant to come across that way, and I don't think that I have. There's no doubt about these two things, and no one in here disputes it. But to parade witnesses up here, witness after witness, basically they're going to testify for the state, and to make this argument that in some way, shape, or form, who Miss Simon was having sexual affairs with was in any way, shape, or form relevant to the question of how Quentin Simon died is just horrendous. It's meant to evoke an emotional response from you. We said in the beginning that most, if not all, of the state's case was based upon speculation and character assassination. I believe those are the exact words Mr. Peirce used. And we sat here for an hour and 28 minutes and listened to Mr. Dean say exactly that. Now, this was their strategy from the beginning. They can pretend that they did something, and I'm not saying that the task was Herculean, obviously, to search the landfill. I learned more about landfills than I've ever wanted to know in this case. But the state made a misstatement in its closing. I asked Mr. Johnson on cross, there were 1,500 loads of trash in that landfill from all over Chatham County and surrounding counties. They pretend like there wasn't other places this could have come from. And the reason why is because they have to. I asked Mr. Youngkin a lot of questions. Mr. Youngkin, quite frankly, the state has to believe Mr. Youngkin's testimony. Their whole theory of the case depends on it. Because of Mr. Youngkin's statement that he saw Quentin Simon at 3 a.m., saw Quentin Simon at 5:30 a.m., and then texted the babysitter, and Quentin was fine, their entire theory of the case falls apart. They have to believe Mr. Youngkin. Mr. Youngkin is the best example of a sock puppet witness we have. He had every reason to get up there and say exactly what they wanted him to say. And we heard very early on, he told them that he was trying to save his own butt. And that's fine. I get it. He went so far as to wire a hotel room with video and audio and to tap his own phone to try and incriminate Ms. Simon for the police. Okay? That's Mr. Youngkin. Now, the state's strategy and the way it's presented this case has been basically to tell you, and I don't think I'm stating anything out of place here, that Miss Simon was a slut, a party girl, someone who lies, a horrible mother, someone who didn't act appropriately as a mother. All of these things could be true more or less to some extent, but none of these things have anything to do with the central question in this case. And they still haven't answered that question with evidence, not speculation, okay? The central question in this case is how did Quentin Simon die? Where did Quentin Simon die? And in what manner did Quentin Simon die? They've charged Miss Simon with murder, okay? That's a hell of a thing. And it's supposed to be a tall order. So I'm sorry if the burden of proof seems a little lax or inconvenient to the state, but in this particular case, they made the allegations. And here's the thing. Mr. Dean was explaining this because they really don't have any idea about any of these things. They just have their best guess. The state whole evidence with regard to counts 1, 2, and 3 comes down to their wild ass guess. That's it. Because any part of their theory and speculation that changes, it falls apart. Mr. Dean was talking about the door opening and closing. Well, he played the video for you. The first video was she said that the front door was unlocked. Okay. He spent this entire trial saying it was open. That wasn't what she said. But okay, whatever. I understand that you have to say that and you have to see it that way because your entire theory falls on that. But let's just assume for a minute that, okay, so she said it was unlocked and it was shut. Well, the back door was opening and closing all night long. Okay. Now, Danny Youngkin said he went to sleep. He has to believe that Danny Youngkin was asleep. His case depends on that. Why? You've seen the layout of the room, okay? You saw the racing bed where one child slept. You saw the pack and play where Clinton slept, and you saw where the baby slept. And then you saw where Danny and Leilani slept. It was one room, wide open. They have to have Danny asleep, and they have to have their exact timeline, because to do otherwise destroys it. What happens if Danny's testimony was correct? It doesn't fit their timeline. So of course they had to go in with Danny Youngkin from the beginning. Now, they didn't come right out of the gate and show you any evidence of time, manner, method of death or anything like that because they don't have it and they're never going to have it. Now, they're asking you to use your emotion to get angry and to convict based upon that. And that's simply not proper. Now, we're at the end of a journey here that's been 2 years in the making. And the key question here is, how did Quentin die? That's why we're all here. That's really it. Was it an accident? Was it a murder? What was it? especially as it relates to the aggravated assault and cruelty to a children and the murder charges in the indictment. What happened to him? What is proven beyond and to the exclusion of every other reasonable doubt? Not just some, but every single one. That's the burden of proof. And they've never answered those questions. In fact, there was a great deal of things you were probably looking for and never really got. For most of this, they were trying to say that October 4th was going out to 204 to see Craig. That didn't materialize. They had the text messages, which you can look at. And the thing is, I don't really understand how any relationship with Craig does anything to shed any light on how Quentin died. Unless you believe the fevered dream they've come up with, that in some way, shape, or form, this has something to do with her attention seeking. And I don't get that, because if someone is craving that much attention and they find that attention and they have someone that gives them that attention, wouldn't that take away the struggle? Wouldn't that take away the strain? I don't buy that. Now, as regards to counts 1, 2, and 3, let's talk about, Mr. Dean did talk about this a little bit. Accident. I don't know whether an accident happened or not. As good a theory as any. We do know there was vomit. We do know there was an overwhelming smell of vomit. We saw Sergeant Stewart, one of the first officers to respond, refused to go in the house on his body-worn camera when Lemons went in because of the smell of vomit. This man was a 35-year-old detective. I mean, a 35-year-old police officer. He's been on the force for 35 years. Okay? He noted that. Lemons noted that. But you know who didn't know that? Danny Youngkin. Nowhere at any point in time did he ever note that. Now, I'm not saying that Danny did anything wrong. My theory is that indicates some sort of accident, some sort of suffocation, something. I don't know. But the difference is I don't have a fixed interest in the outcome there. They do, which is why they have to build this mountain out of a molehill. They don't have that evidence. They never will have that evidence. They have to depend on Danny Youngkin. Because if anything changes, if he was up at 3 a.m., he said this defeats God, and Quentin was fine. Never explained that one. If Quentin's fine at 3 a.m., like Danny Youngkin said, their favorite witness, then the 1 o'clock Azalea trip doesn't matter, does it? They have to believe that. They have to peddle that. They have to sell that. They have to say he was mistaken or wasn't lying, which is always interesting to me. Now, I would love to solve the case. I really would. But I don't have to. They do. I have just as many wild theories as they do. Everybody does. But I don't have to prove them. And more importantly, and this is the most important thing about that, I can have as many wild theories and stand here and tell you those theories as they do. Okay? But it doesn't change the burden of proof. It's just wild speculation, not unlike anything they've done. It doesn't change that the burden of proof lay with them. And the fact is, and they don't like to talk about this, or maybe they do, maybe they're trying to gloss over it. With regards to counts 1, 2, and 3, they have not come close to meeting their burden of proof. The time, manner, method of death. Yeah, that's not part of the requirements, but you have to show that it happened that way. There's no evidence that it was a homicide. There's no evidence that it was murder. None. Zero. Zilch. There never will be. And that's the thing they can't talk about. because to talk about it and to give voice to it undermines their case. But you don't have to believe me. They don't know what happened. Their indictment says they don't know what happened. The state had to concede that in their closing argument that they don't know what happened. You cannot speculate someone into a guilty verdict, ladies and gentlemen. And Mr. Dean used an example, and I like this example. It's actually a pretty good example, and it cuts both ways. He was talking about, I'll use a different example just to kind of differentiate. Circumstantial evidence. Okay, circumstantial evidence. The example we normally give in Georgia is if you're sitting in here and you walk outside and you look around, and when you walked in, the ground was dry, and you walk out, the ground is wet, then you can infer it rained, right? Makes sense. But what you can't do is walk out, see a wet ground, and infer that it's snowing in Denver. Those aren't the same things. So speculation is speculation. Inference is inference. There was no evidence. I asked Dr. Darasol if having the vomit would have made a difference in what she could and couldn't do, and she said yes. I don't control that. They do. You heard from the young lady from the forensic toxicology lab that she didn't have enough to test the vomit. Now, why would that matter? If it was a normal, literally, if it was just normal vomit, you would need to know that. He could have choked on normal vomit. If it was toxic vomit from getting some sort of poison or some sort of drugs, you need to know that. You would think. Okay? We don't. At least she said there wasn't enough to test, and I have no reason to doubt her. But that's a lack of evidence. It doesn't cut either way. And here's the thing, ladies and gentlemen, about the burden of proof and circumstantial evidence. When there's a tie in the evidence like that, the tie goes to the defendant every single time. It doesn't go to the state, it goes to the defendant. Now, when I was in law school, I had a professor who liked to tell this story to illustrate an example. Father takes his son to the restaurant. They're sitting in the restaurant. He says, "Here, son, draw a picture of a horse." So he draws a head, a neck, a back, 4 legs, and a tail. It's like, "How many legs does that horse have, son?" He goes, 4. He goes, "Now, what if the tail is a leg?" He goes, "Well, 5. He goes, "No, son. That's not how that works. The horse only has 4 legs. It doesn't have 5 just because I tell you that the tail is a leg. The tail is still a leg." So I can stand here and tell you stuff all day long. It doesn't make it true. Why do I say that? Well, the judge will charge you on this as well. The questions from the lawyers are not evidence. And I have to point that out in this case because there were a lot of very long-winded questions from the state. But that's not evidence. What comes from the witness stand and the exhibits is evidence. Now, why do I point that out? Daniel Youngkin was overlooked from the beginning. He started cooperating with them from the beginning. Okay? They literally did not look at him for anything. He made some statements to them which either, if they were true, blew up their timeline, and if they were not, were a lie and questioned his credibility. So they have a vested interest in believing him. So let's talk about him leaving. The question for you to determine is do you believe Danny Youngkin when he said that Quentin was alive at 3 a.m. when he got up to check on Scott? If you do, that blows up your case. Do you believe Danny Youngkin when he said he woke up at 5:30 or 5 o'clock to get ready to go to work, and then Quentin was fine, and then texted the babysitter that the kids were going to stay home? If you do, it blows up your timeline. Do you believe his statements from the witness stand that was all bull? That he was fed up with her? And whatever excuse he gave from the witness stand, quite frankly, Because if you do, then it means he was lying before. Now, I'm going to ask you to think about one of the witnesses who did testify, Paul Simon. He was personally one of my favorite witnesses. But he testified exactly different than what Mr. Dean wants you to believe. He knew Danny. And he testified from the witness stand that on that day in that yard, when they were talking to the police, Danny seemed unfazed. He didn't seem upset. He seemed unfazed by this. Now, does that mean I think that Danny did anything wrong? Not necessarily. My theory can work the same way as their theory can. Danny woke up at 5, saw something that happened to Quentin, freaked out, doing the trash on the way to work, came home. He doesn't know anything. Does it mean he did anything wrong? No, I don't think Danny or Miss Simon harmed Quentin in any way, shape, or form. The evidence doesn't show that. I don't have any reason to speculate that. I don't have any vested interest in that particular outcome. They do. But it's in their best interest to believe that. It's in their best interest, when I say them, I mean the state, to try and sell that and peddle that. I asked Danny why he stayed here. Paul was so funny. He's like, man, this is what you signed up for. If you don't like it, because he said Danny was complaining when he got home. They forgot that part. Okay, they didn't want to mention that part because it shows Danny was unhappy. Like, man, you signed up for this. If you don't like it, leave. I asked him why he didn't leave. And remember what he said? I wanted my daughter. Well, you know what? Between October 5th and October 9th or 12th or whatever the hell it was that he left Savannah, he didn't get his daughter because I asked him that question too. So the whole reason he stayed didn't matter when he left. And that didn't seem to faze them at all. But it's something you've got to question. Ladies and gentlemen, emotional decisions are almost always bad decisions. Okay? You have facts on your side, argue the facts. You have the law on your side, you argue the law. And whenever you don't have either on your side, at least with regards to the first 3 counts of this indictment, you depend on emotion. And that's what they've done. I don't mean to come across sounding harsh or cynical or pessimistic. And I don't mean to imply that the feelings that you and the officers and the search team and probably millions of other people have felt about Quentin Simon are not real. They are. I just mean to point out that they're not evidence. And that's what we're here for. They have to prove through evidence. Now, you're going to have to go back into the deliberation room. You're going to have to look at the actual evidence. And you're going to have to look at the actual law. And you're going to have to come up with common sense and use your judgment and leave the emotion at the door. It's a court of law. It's about cold, hard facts. Not emotions, not feelings, not speculations. Not mine, not theirs. I can't speak for you, but I've made emotional decisions in my life, and I can tell you to about a 99% accuracy that most of those emotional decisions were wrong. Not all of them, just most of them. So you're going to have to go back there, and you're going to have to deliberate on each and every count of this indictment. And you're going to have to make decisions about each and every witness that testified. And then you're going to have to come up with a verdict. Now, the reason why I say that is there is another alternative solution. I'm not surprised when a 21 and 28-year-old couple who have a child together, who are doing drugs together, lie about doing drugs together. Doesn't surprise me. It also doesn't have an inference of committing murder. Okay? That's what we're here for. That is the elephant in the room. the state does not like to talk about Danny. Danny was just as much involved in the drugs as Miss Simon was. Involuntary intoxication is not a defense. We're not even saying that. Okay? What I am saying is it's just not very honest to say they weren't doing drugs. And Danny said he wasn't responsible, but that was in response to, I mean, I'm sorry, you're in a room full of small minor children doing drugs that are toxic to those children. Is there any manner or method in which doing those drugs in that room can be deemed responsible? But he went out of his way to put, he was on top of a chest of drawers that he couldn't reach. Anyone who's had children knows, and you don't have to leave your common sense at the door for this. Children get into everything. Okay? They do. They get out of everything. They get into everything. That is just what they do. And in Danny's own words, these were some mean-ass kids. And I suspect that no matter how responsible you were, they could get into something. Is that what happened here? I don't know. But neither do they. Now I'm going to talk about the concealing the death and the azalea mobile home. To Mr. Dean, one of the things my dad told me was when you're a hammer, every problem is like a nail. Okay? But a lack of evidence is still a lack of evidence. His timeline only works. And I don't understand, he's right, motive's not an element of crime. But his timeline only works if it happens exactly the way he said it did. And in order to believe that, you have to believe Danny Youngkin. You have to believe that he, on his own, without prompting, without any prompting by anyone, said that at 3 o'clock, Quentin was fine, and 5:30, Quentin was fine when he left, and texted the babysitter on his own without ever checking on one of those two things. But see, here's the thing. He was being questioned by the police. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure out if they're questioning you and pushing you that it's probably not a good thing. They never asked for a reasonable explanation of that because it would screw up their timeline. What if he was the 1 a.m. trip? That would screw up their timeline too. What if he wasn't? That would screw up their timeline too, especially if he said that she was fine at 3 o'clock. So now, that being said, Ms. Simon doesn't have to prove herself innocent of these charges. The state has to prove her guilty. And Mr. Dean said, well, we've done that, so you don't have to consider that. No. That's not how this works. Okay? You have to consider all of the evidence, all of the witnesses, all of the testimony. Not consider what I'm saying or his theory. You have to consider what you come up with. And with that, I'm going to get to what the burden of proof is. And how you the judge is going to give you the law. And I'm going to tell you, if there's any conflict between anything I say or anything Mr. Dean says, the judge is the ultimate arbiter of this. And give me 1 second. I misplaced what I was looking for. So, count 1 is malice murder. In order to be malice murder, there has to be malice aforethought. Ms. Simon had to unlawfully cause the death of Quentin Simon, a human being. If you believe beyond a reasonable doubt that the state has proven that she did that, the only verdict you can return is a guilty verdict. But if you think there's no trace of that evidence whatsoever, your verdict has to be not guilty. If there's any evidence at all, even the smallest measure amount of evidence, a scintilla of evidence, your verdict has to be not guilty. That's not beyond a reasonable doubt. If you think that there's reasonable suspicion to think she may have did it, the only verdict you can return is not guilty. Because it has to be beyond a reasonable doubt. If you think that the greater weight of the evidence is in the state's favor versus the defendant's favor slightly, that's what we call a preponderance. Then your only verdict you can return is not guilty, because the standard is beyond a reasonable doubt. If you have a firm belief that everything that Mr. Dean and the state is putting forth is true, but you have a reasonable doubt as to what actually happened, for which you can state a reason as a fair, impartial juror, the only verdict you can return then is not guilty. The only way you can get to guilty is if you're convinced beyond a reasonable doubt. That's a high burden of proof. And I present to you, ladies and gentlemen, as to count one, there is no way to get there. As to count two, and I'm being specific on this. Yeah, they don't have to tell you what the offensive weapon was, but they have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that it happened the way they said. There's zero evidence of that. Count three. Count three is the count that has to do with cruelty to a child, I believe. Now, their theory is that Miss Simon went into a room with two other sleeping children and Mr. Youngkin and did something to Quentin Simon without anyone hearing it or waking up, and then left to dump his body. Despite the evidence that Daniel Youngkin said he was fine at 3, despite the evidence that Daniel Youngkin said he was fine at 5:30, despite the evidence that he's the one that texted the babysitter. So let's turn to the concealing a death count. Again, the standard of burden of proof is the same for all of these counts. So I'm not going to be repetitive and do it for each one because I don't get paid by the word. So there's no reason. You can understand and assume that the standard stays the same. Concealing the death of another. The only way that count is proven beyond a reasonable doubt is if you believe that Quentin Simon's body was in the bag and she threw the bag in the trash at the Zay Mobile Home Park at 1-something in the morning. Beyond a reasonable doubt. There's not evidence beyond a reasonable doubt. There's evidence she said she went. You know, they have a theory. Hell, my theory is the same. She might have went to get dope. But I would guess. Cokeheads do cocaine. Opiate users do opiates. Weed smokers smoke weed. Okay? You have the text messages, and you have Mr. Youngkin's testimony. Mr. Youngkin told you that they were using every day at this point. Okay? So you have the statement that Leilani was trying to cover for Daniel. Their theory is that was a lie. But Daniel's the one that left town a few days after this happened. They don't seem to have any questions about that. That's always seemed odd to me. As a detective, going to detect stuff, walking into a scene where a child's abducted, my first instinct would be the non-related boyfriend or husband of the mother. But that doesn't seem to be the case here because it doesn't fit the timeline. That doesn't mean that I think Danny necessarily did anything wrong. No. But it seems like a natural, obvious question to ask. Seems like a natural, obvious investigation to make. And it does look suspect that A, he helped out almost immediately. He turned on her almost immediately. He set up the hotel video and audio surveillance almost immediately. Wiretap for 60 days. Now they talk about that and they play these little excerpts from the statements, but the consistency from Miss Simon has been the entire time that she never harmed Quentin. And she didn't dump his body. So it is a hell of a thing, but if you're going to accuse somebody of a hell of a crime, you better have a hell of a good amount of evidence. That might start with actually proving that a murder occurred versus an accident. We don't have that here. So, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you've been sitting here for 8 days of evidence and almost a half day of argument at this point. So I'm going to ask you, when you go back, and I'm going to tell you just straight up, I don't give a damn about lying about smoking weed. I really don't. Okay? Most drug users lie about their drug use, Mr. Youngkin included. That doesn't usually concern me. But I'm going to ask you to go back and return the only verdict you can on this evidence. As to count 1, I'm going to ask you to return a not guilty verdict. As to count 2, I'm going to ask the same. As to count 3, I'm going to ask the same. As to count 4, there's some question as to whether or not A, this happened the way they say, B, who it was, and C, whether or not this even happened the way they're alleging here. That's reasonable doubt. The false report of a crime, I haven't touched on this very much, but you know what? The reality of it is that could have happened too. And it actually would make a hell of a lot more sense. And here's why. Rather than trying to say Miss Simon wasn't reacting, and I don't really know what the hell this means, but Miss Simon's not reacting the way you would expect someone to. Well, I'm fairly certain I don't react the way people expect me to sometimes, and you probably don't react the way people expect you to sometimes. But when it comes to your child missing or presumed dead, that tends to make people react in a weird way. So I don't think they've proven false report of a crime. If you woke up and your child wasn't there, what are you supposed to do? And she did report it. Okay? They tried to say in the beginning that she didn't, but you actually heard the 911 call was made from her phone, and Danny was the one that got on and talked because she couldn't speak. We heard the 911 tape. I didn't play it. They did. Making a false statement. The October 4th was to pay an existing drug debt. We saw the Cash App. We had no evidence to refute that or rebut that. Okay. So could have been an existing drug debt, could have been new drugs. I don't know. But I think there's some reasonable doubt on that one as well. You saw and to be quite frankly, I don't really care about this one, but you saw her say, I only smoke marijuana. I don't care. I just don't care. Okay. Count 8, falsely stating the only controlled substance she had used in the past 24 hours was marijuana. Again, I just don't care. I really don't. And to be honest with you, it's an abduction case and it's a murder case. They don't even. Count 9, the oral jail statement.
Sorry, I had to beep in. When he says, I don't care about that. I don't care about that. Of course he doesn't care. He is a public defender that has been told by the state he has to represent her. And a lot of public defenders have actually built law firms off of being a public defender with a high profile case. And this is. It certainly is. Why can't Mr. I can't keep a tie straight? Look at his tie. Look at that. Does he not even know what a tie tack is? Does he not know how to button up a coat? How does he explain to us how Quentin got to that landfill? Can he explain to us this? How was his skull broken before he died? The forensic anthropologist made it very clear that bones were broken post-mortem, but his skull was broken before he died. So why doesn't Mr. I can't find a tie tack explain this to us? Who in the house did this? It wasn't Danny. It wasn't Danny. The forensic anthropologist explained when we break a bone, it instantly starts trying to heal itself back. This skull right here had evidence of trying to heal, meaning he was alive when he got hit in the head. There was no car wreck. There was no accident. There was no he fell in the pool. Nothing like that. Everything else that happened to him was post-mortem. Sal, I'm gonna spank your buns. What you doing right there? Sal, you are the best. We have been together for a long time, Sal. I love you. Thank you so much for this. Look at that. If I had a cowbell, I would ring it. She explained to us the differences in bones from when we're alive and when we pass away. Ridiculous behavior here from the defense. Ridiculous.
The oral jail statement's bothersome. But I will ask you this, and it's not to make an excuse, but they're pushing you for an explanation, and you give one. And even if that was the reason why you went and it didn't work out that way, is there really any evidence one way or the other? She says she went to see Misty. Does it matter if her name is Missy, not Misty? Does it matter if she got the Orajel or not? Count 10 is the putting Clinton in a dumpster. I believe there's reasonable doubt as to that one. Count 11, making a false statement. Again, meeting, this was October 8th. These are repetitive and redundant. This was on October 8th. The prior was, I believe, October 5th. Count 12 is use controlled substances. And I'm not really sure how you can admit to using controlled substances.
This fucking fool needs to take a break. He really does. I understand that he's been commanded by the state of Georgia to do his job. These are indictments by a grand jury. So basically, the case has been tried twice. They had a grand jury that said, yeah, it all makes sense. He keeps saying, well, what does it matter? What does it matter? What does it matter? It all matters. Of course it does. He knows she's guilty. He knows. He's just giving it the good old college swing to see if he can stay out of the appeals court. Because once you're locked up with a client and you're a public defender, you gotta ride that train all the way to the station. He don't want to do it. So we can't say that the grand jury gave over 19 indictments, which, I mean, I can indict a ham sandwich. I don't care about that. But this is the big game. And he's doing everything he can I get it. I get it. I dig it. But Danny's not on trial. And I have a really hard time believing, with all the evidence that's come out, that the jury will go back and deliberate and go, well, what about Danny? What about Danny? What about Danny? You have to be kidding me.
Substance. I guess they're saying that you didn't. I don't know. But count 10, count 12 to me, I don't understand it. I don't see how it's beyond a reasonable doubt. And I ask for not guilty on that one as well. Count 13 again is the Orgel story yet again. Count 14 is the dumpster story yet again on a different day. Count 15, Misty again on a different day. So a lot of these are repetitive and redundant. So when you're back there, you have to consider the witnesses, their manner and method of testifying, and what they testified to. Why do I say that? Do you really care if she was sleeping with Craig Weston? Does it really matter? Is it germane to whether or not Quentin Simon was killed intentionally or died as a result of his accident? I present to you no. Some of the evidence they presented too, and again, Officer Zerke, I have no doubt she was emotional about it. But again, the only reason to put her up and have her cry was to have her cry. Did she add anything beyond that? No. It was to play on your emotion. And it doesn't matter how much, how often, how long they played on that emotion. It doesn't change the fact that they haven't produced any evidence. They haven't met their burden. They haven't proved that Miss Simon killed her son. Give me 1 second. I'm going to ask you to go back there, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to ask you to do the hardest thing you've probably ever done in your life, is to set your emotions aside, to view the evidence, and to return a verdict of not guilty. The state has not proved that Miss Simon killed her child. They have speculated wildly, I might add, but they produced no evidence. And I know that that's a hard thing to ask. But I'm going to ask you to do it. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Hilliard. Turning to the state, Ms. Parker. And just so the jury knows, Parker is part of the prosecution team, is doing the conclusion of the closing arguments. What I anticipate after that is that we will break. I'll give you an opportunity to go to lunch. I will bring you back and I will charge you at that time with the jury instructions.
Just one moment to get set up. Thank you. On October 5th of 2022, in the dark of the night, while the rest of her family slept, Leilani Simon did something incredibly evil. She murdered her own 1-year-old baby and then put his body in a dumpster, where just a few hours later, his body would be destroyed by heavy machinery. And we have proven that beyond a reasonable doubt. During the course of a murder trial, we spend a lot of time talking about the defendant and what the defendant did, because it is our burden to prove beyond a reasonable doubt what the defendant did. But because of that, we don't spend a lot of time talking about the victim. Quentin Simon in this case. One of the elements that we have to prove in murder is that the defendant murdered a human being. And Quentin Simon was a human being. A real live little boy. He liked to play. He was funny. He was affectionate. He was a good eater. He loved cheese. He liked to camp out on the floor at the McCarta's house and watch cartoons. He was a real live boy, a human being, and he shouldn't be thought of as an abstract in this case. He should be thought of as a person. He should be thought of as the little boy who loved Danny. And you heard from Paul and from Toledo and say, "Get me, Danny, Danny." He should be thought of as a real live human being, a person. A real live human being, a person whose mother put his body in a dumpster. And we have proven that beyond a reasonable doubt. Mr. Dean told you that we don't have to prove motive, and we don't. It surprises people sometimes. Motive is not an element of the crime that prosecutors have to prove, but it's just not. But in this case, we know what the motive is, and it's important to understand that motive, to understand why a mother could do something so awful as kill her own child. Because it is. It's something so evil that it's almost unspeakable, incomprehensible that a mother could kill her own 1-year-old baby. So we have to think about the state of mind that this woman was in at that time. She was deeply, deeply unhappy with her life. She had 3 really small children. She had a 3-year-old, a 20-month-old, and an infant. In the best of circumstances, if you had family support, if you had your own place to live, if you had plenty of money, even in great circumstances, having to take care of a 3-year-old, a 20-month-old, and an infant would be so hard and so stressful. But to add on to that stress, she didn't have those other things. Her relationship with her mother was not good. Her mother was gone a lot, so that was not a real support for her. Her relationship with Danny was falling apart. Danny was getting fed up with her. Their relationship was falling apart. They didn't have any money. She was drug addicted. She and Danny were living in her mother's house in one room with these 3 children. And when we talk about her relationship with Craig, or the fact that she had 3 children with 3 different fathers, we're not trying to call her a slut. Nobody is trying to slut shame the defendant. We wouldn't do that. This is 2024. That's not what this is about. When we talk about those things, what we're trying to show you is that this woman's self-esteem came from men. And part of why she was so deeply unhappy was because Danny was rejecting her. And it made her feel horrible, because that's where her self-esteem came from. And that's why at 22 years old, she already had 3 children with 3 different fathers, because men were so important to how she saw herself and how she felt about herself. And that's what was part of why she felt so awful that night. You saw the suicide video that she did, where she talked about how unhappy she was. She even said to her children, I can't love you because I can't love myself. It doesn't seem she ever intended to kill herself. It was something she was going to send to Danny, probably for attention, for him to feel sorry for her, because she was manipulative of Danny, very manipulative of Danny. And the reason that she started this sexual relationship with Craig was to fill a void there. And this sexual relationship with Craig was a new thing. It's something that had just happened in the weeks before this. So on the night that she killed Quentin, Danny had rejected her. She's using drugs. She's on cocaine, marijuana, Percocet, and maybe alcohol because we saw her go and buy beer at the convenience store. She's under the influence. She said in her own statements that drug use made her angry and impulsive. So she's unhappy. She's mad at Danny. She's under the influence of drugs that make her angry and impulsive. And so she goes to Arkwright looking for Craig because Craig is where she has been getting that need fulfilled for male attention that makes her feel better about herself. And Craig's not there that night. That's why it matters and why we made Craig come in here and testify, because he wasn't there that night. And so she couldn't get that need fulfilled. She couldn't feel better about herself. So instead, she does something so drastic. She killed Quentin. And in the act of killing Quentin, she became a sympathetic person and got Danny's attention back. She became the mother of a missing child. And Danny ran out of work to be by her side. That's what she wanted. That was the manipulation. And it's so hard to believe a mother would do that. But that's why you have to think about her frame of mind and how low and desperate she felt that night, and that she was under the influence of drugs that she admits make her angry and impulsive. That's what happened. You also may wonder, why Quentin? Why that child? And Quentin was her disposable child. She did not like Quentin's father. She loved Zane. Zane was her ride or die. You heard Michelle McCarta talk about how she would say Zane had been through everything with her. He was her ride or die. And Sky, who was her youngest child, the baby infant, was Danny's child. She needed Sky to keep Danny around. Quentin was disposable. She didn't really like Quentin. We heard testimony about how she would call Quentin names. We heard testimony about her hitting him, about her pushing him in the pool. She didn't do this to any of her other children. She would feed Zane before she fed Quentin. She didn't do that to any of her other children. Quentin was disposable. And so she disposed of him in the trash can. But that's why Quentin, and not one of her other children. Her plan did not last. Her story came apart really, really fast. Because the police, when a child is missing, it is all hands on deck, and they're going to start using every resource they can to find this child and see what's going on in this household. And it was within a very short period of time that they discovered her vehicle on those slot cameras leaving home during the night when she said she had been at home. So it was within hours that they knew she was lying. The defense also said that we don't like to talk about Danny, and that's not true. Like, we talked about Danny a lot. There's nothing about Danny that makes us uncomfortable talking about him or why he didn't do this. There's overwhelming evidence that woman is the person who killed Quentin Simon and not Danny. The defense also kept talking about Danny being up at 3 o'clock in the morning and seeing Quentin. That did not come into evidence in this trial. Go back and check your notes. That is not something that is in evidence. The only mistake Danny made was in the morning when he left at 5:20 in the morning. He originally said he saw Quentin. And he talked about that. He just assumed it because he woke up in the dark, got ready for work, quietly left the house. He just assumed Quentin was there then. He did not go over to the packing plate and look in and say, hey, Quentin, you there? He didn't do that. And so because he had not seen anything weird when he left home, he just assumed that Quentin was there and it was fine. And when pressed and questioning, he explained that he had not actually gone over to the pack and play and looked and made sure that Quentin was there. That is the only inconsistency in his statement, and it is very understandable. The defense has started trying to suggest that Danny could have done this, but Danny's not the one that was at the dumpster in the middle of the night throwing a bag of trash in. A dumpster that later went to an area of the landfill where Quentin's body was found. It was not Danny's phone that was at the dump. It was not Danny's car driving to the dump. It was her. She drove to the dump, and she admitted that she was there. Mr. Dean spent a lot of time making it clear about where this trash went to the landfill. The landfill is huge. And Quentin's body was found in the specific part of the landfill where the dumpster she was throwing his body into put its trash. Otherwise, he never would have been found, which is what she wanted. She didn't want him to be found because then forevermore she could be the mother of a missing child and sympathetic. I want to talk to you about the burden of proof. Mr. Hilliard said the state hates the burden of proof. We don't. We welcome that burden. It is our burden, and we welcome it with open arms because we want the right person convicted. We should have to prove to you beyond a reasonable doubt that she's the person that committed this crime. And we have, and she is. We don't hate reasonable doubt at all. Mr. Dean talked about reasonable doubt. I'm happy to talk about reasonable doubt and burden of proof. Reasonable doubt does not mean, as the defense suggested, that we have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt every fact that we put up before you. What we have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt is the elements of the crimes, and we have done that. It means a doubt with a reason, not just any doubt, but a doubt using your common sense. So you go back in that jury room when we're done, and using your common sense, you ask yourselves, did that woman murder Quentin Simon? And the answer to that is absolutely yes, she did. Absolutely. And all of the evidence points to her. All of it. Mr. Hilliard also spent a lot of time talking about emotion in this case. And yes, this is an emotional case. Murder cases, by definition, have emotion in them because a human being has died. And the murder of a really small child, there's no way you can escape emotion. There's going to be emotion. People who testify are going to have emotion. We're going to have emotion when we talk about it. It's unavoidable. But we're not asking you to find her guilty based on emotion. We're asking you to find her guilty based on all of the facts and evidence that we have put before you. The 34 witnesses that have come in and testified and told very specifically how these events happened. All of the statements that you've heard the defendant make, where she changed her story over and over and over and over. That's what we're asking you to make this finding on of her guilt. The actual evidence. And when it comes to her emotion, that's fair game. You absolutely can consider her emotion and her demeanor when you're evaluating this case. And it's important to look at her emotion because while it is absolutely true, people react differently to trauma, none of her reactions were anywhere within what is believable. They just were not. There's some people, when something terrible happens to them, they shut down, they're very quiet, they're stoic, they give one-word answers. That's totally normal. There are other people who become absolutely hysterical, they can't even talk. Absolutely normal. There's a wide range of human emotions. What is not normal is for a mother to wake up and find her child missing and react the way this woman did. She didn't run upstairs to Paul, who was at home, and say, Paul, Quentin's missing. Have you seen Quentin? It's Quentin up here. She didn't do that. She didn't go wake up Paul. Paul had no idea what was going on until the police were there, which was 20, 30 minutes later. She didn't go running out in the yard, in the woods, looking for her child. She didn't do that. She called Danny because that's the whole motive. She wanted Danny's attention. That's why she did this. And so Danny's the first person she called. And she didn't do another thing until Danny got home. Danny got home and found her just standing around outside. She wasn't looking for Quentin. There is no mother who would not look for their child frantically under these circumstances. She had not called the police. She'd not asked Paul for help. She'd not called over to the McCartas and said, hey, Quentin's missing. Do y'all have him? She didn't do any of those things. She waited for Danny to come home because that was the whole point, was to get Danny's attention. And it wasn't until Danny was at home and he had reached out to the McCartas. Michelle suggested they call the police, that things started happening. That is not normal. Her lying through the course of this investigation is not normal. It's not normal because she wasn't a worried mother. She was a murderer trying to hide what she did. We cannot prove to you the way she killed Quentin. We can't, because she made sure that his body was decimated, was ground to nothing but bits of bone. And under the law, defendants are not rewarded for that. The law does not require us to prove how she killed him when she's the one that hid how she killed him. You're not going to hear anything in the judge's charges that say we have to prove how she killed him. The defense can say it all they want, but that is not an element of the crime that we have to prove. And please listen to the law, because you will hear that. We don't have to prove that. It is not the fault of the state that we can't prove that. It is her fault, because she made sure that his body would be in such a state that we couldn't prove it. She wanted his body never to be found. And if it weren't for the work of a whole bunch of people who really cared about getting justice for this child, enough so that they would put all this gear on and dig through stinky trash trying to find him, he never would have been found. That's also part of how we know that this is not an accident. Her behavior and her statements. If something had happened to Quentin and she had found him injured, not responsive in his pack and play or something like that, she would have called for help. She would have woken up Paul. If Danny was still there, she would ask Danny for help. She would have called an ambulance. That would be normal. There is zero evidence in this case that this child had some accidental drug overdose. There's just not. He did not have access to any drugs. Everybody has said he couldn't get out of his pack and play. So once he was in there, he was in there for the night. He wasn't roaming around, climbing on shelves, trying to touch stuff. And they didn't just leave drugs lying around because they were expensive. And pretty much they used them right after they bought them. Also, we tested his brain matter. There was no indication of any drugs in his brain. This is just not an accident. We went above and beyond to rule out every other possibility for this child to death. Medical, accident, SIDS, it's none of those things. It's that his mother murdered him. One other thing I want to say about Danny is Danny leaving. Danny did leave town. He didn't just leave. Like, law enforcement knew he was leaving, and they were still in touch with him. He didn't just run away. Danny had no tie to Savannah except for her. And when this happened, there was tremendous media attention, and Danny wanted to get away. It's totally understandable, does not suggest any kind of guilt in any way whatsoever. His phone was still tapped at that point. Law enforcement was still in contact with him. There is just nothing to suggest that Danny had anything to do with this. And you saw Danny on the stand. Danny broke down talking about Quentin. And it was very genuine. And you could tell that he had emotion for this child and was sad about what had happened to this child. It was a very realistic, normal emotional response that he had. A child's mother should be the one person in the world that they can count on to keep them safe. Parents have a visceral, emotional need to keep their children safe. It is normal, it is biological, but that is not what Leilani Simon did. She murdered her child. She put his body in a dumpster where he would be taken to a landfill and his little precious body would be ripped to bits by heavy machinery to cover up what she did. Leilani Simon is not a mother. She is a monster. And I do not use that word lightly. But what this woman did in this case is horrific. And she is absolutely a monster. We cannot undo the horror of what she did that night. We can't undo it. It's done. We can't undo it. This child is gone, and nothing we do or say can bring him back. We cannot give him back the 80 or so years that he should have had ahead of him, a long life, all the things he should have gotten to experience. We can't give him back to people that care about him. We can't do that. But what we can do for baby Quentin now is give him justice. He deserves justice. You can give him the justice he deserves, and you can give her the justice she deserves.
So, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, at this point, that will be the last you will hear the attorneys speak directly to you. So at this point, before I release you for lunch, I'm going to remind you to follow the court's instructions. Do not discuss the case with anyone, not even with each other yet, because the case is not with you yet. Don't allow anyone to ask you any questions about the case. Don't do any research on the case or the folks involved. Avoid all media, including social media. So at this point, I am going to release you. We're going to return in an hour. The time now is 1:07, so I'm going to round it up to 2:15. When you come back, be ready to sit, and I will give you the instructions at that time. I will warn you, it takes at least a good 30, 35, 40 minutes. That is what you're going to hear from me. All right? And so with that, thank you for your attention. You are released for lunch.
Jurors are exiting.
Everyone, please have a seat. Thank you. So anything further from the state?
No, Your Honor.
Thank you. From the defense.
Nothing from the defense, Judge.
All right, thank you. We're gonna break now. We're going to aim to be ready to start at 2:15. All right, we're in recess. Thank you.
Well, I think that the state has certainly proven their case. And especially the chick that came out after the guy that looks like Superman. So they're going to come back and give jury instructions. There'll be no more closing arguments. How long do you think it's going to take the jury to decide? It's 126 there. I don't think it's going to be very long. Red Road said 1 hour. A waitress said 2 hours. It's going to take them longer to go through the questionnaire. I think we're going to have a verdict. Hopefully by the end of the day, because they don't want to come back tomorrow. A Wolf said 3 tops. Yep, 3 tops is what A Wolf said. It should take about, 30 seconds, but they have to fill out all that crap they give them. All right, my friends. Well, I'm going to post, and I do this on every trial, because we don't want to sit there and listen to jury instructions. If you want to listen to it, you can listen to it. So we are on now what's called Jury Watch, Verdict Watch. So I've got everything scheduled. It's unlisted at this point because I am on pins and needles. I think the last attorney that spoke made it very clear as to what was going on. So hashtag it, Verdict Watch. And I've got all my notifications on. I'm going to be waiting and waiting and waiting. I'm not going to sit around here for the next 2 hours while they eat their Subway sandwich. Not going to do it. Not going to do it. I don't want to hear the jury instructions. I am waiting on the verdict. And I know you all are too. Jury instructions are always the same. Don't look at media. Consider the evidence. All of that stuff. Liz said, but basically she hasn't handed the case over to the jury yet. Absolutely she has. Yeah, absolutely. They're going to lunch and she's going to give them jury instructions. Jinbug said, I missed everything. What's going on? The closing arguments. Closing arguments. It's in their hands now, like Brett said. It's in their hands now. And it's very emotional, extremely emotional for all of us, because we've been talking about Quentin since October 6th of 2022. So the state has rested. Deliberations are done. Evidence is out. So what I'm going to do, and I've done this wrong a million times before, I'm just going to put a thumbnail up saying verdict. So the minute that the verdict is coming through, we will be live. Jinbug said, emotion indeed. This case is close to my heart. You're telling me. Yeah. So we are now on Verdict Watch. Beck Carter said, God's got this. Oh, he does, for sure. He does. Let me tell you how much God has got this. It's to find one piece of Quentin in that landfill is next to impossible. Billy's not in the courtroom. Billy didn't testify. Billy had custody of Quentin. Billy had custody of Quentin. And it's like she's asking for a pat on the back. That she didn't do a damn thing for her grandson. And I'm not saying she has to. I'm not saying she has to. Grandparents should be grandparents. In my opinion. However, when the state says your child is unfit, so now you are getting custody of not one but two, you don't turn those children back over to the one that's unfit. You just don't do it. And I loved how that attorney laid it out. She said Leilani is very unhappy with herself. She has children with all these different men. Horrible relationship with her mother. She gets whatever she wants from her mother. Let's be honest. Okay, she does. She lives with her mother. And they're all stuck in this one room. However, that is no means for murder at all. None. Yeah, and Billy can cram her Christmas wish list, can't talk, her Amazon wish list up her ass, where she said she wants to do like a toy drive for all these kids, and she wants Cher to come down and be with her and all that stuff. No, kiss my ass. No. The ultimate responsibility is taking care of a child. Plain and simple. It is to take care of a child. I don't mean showers and baths and changing diapers. Full development. All the way out the door. Now, what they do when they leave the door, that's on them. But Billy, who, by the way, is not on trial, neither is Danny. Leilani is on trial. And I have a feeling that this verdict is going to come back guilty. All right. You all are the absolute best. I will see you back here as soon as the verdict comes in.